You're that smart.
Let me put it this way. Have you ever heard of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates?
Yes?
Morons.
Really?
Somebody that's trying to get an introduction to philosophy, are there any books that you would recommend?
No, man, but you got to keep going. What am I going to do, quit? That's not an option. You got to keep on keeping on. Life's a garden, dig it? You make it work for you. You never give up, man. That's my philosophy. You hear that in there?
Just as long as you know that I teach ethics, I don't actually, live it.
Philosophy, Mr. President, is shoot first and ask questions later.
Welcome to Vitals and Virtues, Adam.
It's great to be here.
Right?
Great to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. This I said in one of the most recent episodes that I put out that I put the most effort into it, which it might be true. It was one on the how to unite ourselves with the communion and the Eucharist.
Do you recline on these things?
I don't know. However you can get the...
Oh, man, that's kind of comfortable.
Is it better than what it was before?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we're still figuring it out. But yeah, so I said in this episode, I was like, I've spent more time prepping this than any other one. And then I was like, wait, I've read a whole dissertation for in prep for tonight's episode.
Imagine if you'd written one.
Yeah, so you've really done the most prep for this.
Little did I know.
That it was
all leading to this
moment.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so here, you brought me some beer for tonight.
I did. I
mean, you're gonna drink it too, so it's not like you brought it just for me.
I'm gonna drink probably more than you. So I brought you some beer from the brewery that I own, 0.25% of.
There you go.
Three Roads Brewing Company.
Shout out to Three Roads.
Please,
well, you're sponsoring the show.
Please come down. I get my dividends and beer tokens.
Sweet.
What we'll be drinking tonight is Drive-By Juice. They're double IPA, a little hazy, a little juicy. Always a little different because they're such a small brewery, They don't have the consistency of the big boys. You got to get some you got to get that sound on the...
Well, that was your job. I got the crack. Well, I poured that like Hillary, as I always do.
Like Hillary?
Yeah, you never saw that meme?
No.
Hillary Clinton pouring a beer at some bar, and it was like 90% head, like no amber, like just, oh, that looks great. But yeah, so we're here to talk about virtue ethics, right? That's what this dissertation was on.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
we have a lot, and we have all oodles of time. The kids are asleep.
Can we dedicate this episode to somebody?
Absolutely.
I don't know if you do that sort of thing.
I don't, but we can.
I would like to dedicate this episode. I'm just going to go ahead and say that since it's your thing, and I'm taking over dedication to. And let's do a toast to Alistair McIntyre. You know who he is?
No, but I'll cheers to him.
Without him, my dissertation could not have been written. He's I don't know how much backstory I should give, but basically virtue ethics dominated Western philosophy as an ethical theory until the Enlightenment went out of favor. For about 200 years, Kantian ethics and utilitarianism took over. In the middle of the 20th century, it sort of began to get revived. And Alistair McIntyre was probably wasn't the only, but probably the main person responsible for reviving virtue ethics with his landmark book, After Virtue. Alistair McIntyre.
You reference this book in your dissertation.
Yes.
That's why the name is familiar. And that only is why I'm familiar.
He's also a Catholic, although he came to Catholicism, later. And
shout out to those good Catholics out there.
He's also my philosophical grandfather. So he was my dissertation advisor, Rebecca Stengel, was his last student, and I was her first student.
What?
And he's also dead. So may he rest in
mercy
peace.
Of God, rest in peace.
Don't be too
Alistair.
sad. He lived to be 96. So
he probably was ready.
I think so.
Yeah,
He was writing until pretty much closer, to the end.
Yeah, well, that's like what's his name? He's like super duper old professor at Boston College, I think.
Oh, Peter Kreeft.
That's the one.
He keeps writing.
He's still rocking.
He had
man.
this stuff prepared. He had to have had like these Word files. He's just like cranking them out.
I don't think he had Word. I feel like this dude's still using a typewriter.
Oh man, that reminds me of one of my favorite professors in undergrad, Dr. Charles Lewis. I hope he's still alive. I really need to reach out to him. He loved my recent paper on AI, but he's
probably still alive then. That's a recent paper.
He's got to be in his late 80s at this point.
Well.
But he
cheers to him too.
Yeah, cheers to him. Let's dedicate to him too. More than anyone responsible for me being in philosophy, it was after his class Hegel, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche that I thought, oh, maybe I could do philosophy after undergrad.
Yeah.
But
before we get too off the rails into all of your dedications,
I was just going to say he didn't use a computer.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to send him an email, you send it to the secretary for the department. She would print it out and hand it to him.
Nice. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. Well, so before we get to the meat and potatoes of this episode, we could talk about anything. Like I said, the kids are asleep. Like since we've started, I've had to change my recording time. Usually it's while the kids are napping, and now it's like it's nice. They're asleep. I think like my wife is reading a book, and August is asleep. You prayed for me that my newborn would sleep through the night unusually early.
I did.
It hasn't come true yet.
Well, the prayers of a righteous man availeth much, and the other.
Not so much. Is that
the other? The obverse is also true.
It's telling.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, I prayed for it too, and it didn't. He's still weak. So between the two of us, we need to be better. Yeah. Be better, Adam. Well, so many questions that I have for you.
Really?
You old wise man. You.
I'm gonna be 41 in a week.
In a week. Well, happy
June
early
16th.
Birthday.
Yeah.
Happy birthday. Because I'll forget. That's on Father's Day this year, isn't it? Or right around it?
It's always close to Father's Day. Yeah, I don't think it's.
What do you do for as a father on Father's Day? Do you make everybody breakfast?
I ask that I can leave the house for 3 hours, and usually go read at a brewery. That sounds
pretty great.
That's my gift. But yeah, try to do
with
something
the beer
kids
tokens
too.
that you got paid.
Yep.
Nice. Mm-hmm. This is a delightful beer, by the way.
You like it?
Yeah, I mean,
it's
I've had
never
it before.
the same.
I've had it before. Does it have like tasting notes or anything? Oh yeah, it does.
Yeah.
All right. Shout out to Three Roads and their drive-by juice. Living up to its name, this beer is fruit juice in beer form, hopped almost exclusively in the dry hop, with a ridiculous amount of juicy Citra, Mosaic, and Vic Secret hops. This double IPA has huge notes of papaya, mango, and fresh orange with big dank undertones.
I get the dank undertones.
A silly,
like
smooth, creamy mouthfeel and very low bitterness make this big beer approachable to the hophead and non-hophead alike. 7.6 ABV. So that's a hefty beer.
Yeah.
I'm a little man. It doesn't take a lot to be hefty to me, I suppose.
All right. Yeah.
Anyways, it's pretty delightful. I taste the dankness too, but also
end, yeah.
I think mostly the papaya. Just kidding. I've never had papaya.
If my IPA doesn't have even a hint of papaya, I don't know. I'm kidding. I'd drink anything almost.
You would. I've seen.
My favorite IPAs are the West Coast. It's like a fistful of pine tar and dirt. Just more bitterness, the better.
Seems kind of yucky to me, but different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you been up to, man? Spoiler. I mean, I know the answer to this. We just did our updates, before we started recording.
I'll give 3 things in ascending order of complexity or substance. Trying to build an accessory dwelling unit (ADU) in our backyard, and we live in one of the more. I don't know. We live in a neighborhood in Farmville where they have more. The neighbors care more what's in their backyard, so the planning commission is making me do all sorts of things to build this tiny house in my backyard. The final plan is so that my in-laws have a place to age in place.
So you don't have to ship them off to a nursing home?
Yeah.
Nursing homes probably won't be well, I don't know how old your in-laws are.
They'll still be a thing.
Nursing homes are pretty rough places.
Yeah.
Commendable actions to build yourself your in-laws a suite.
I mean, I'm not going to build it. Somebody knows what they're doing is going to build it.
Yeah. I mean, you had me build bookshelves in your house. Like,
didn't have to say that.
I didn't. Well, you did. You chose.
Hey, I had stuff to do. I got to read Aristotle and teach it.
That's true. I tried reading Nicomachean Ethics as like, let me get to some source text as I'm reading your dissertation. That was a silly idea for me as a human being.
Next time, I can give you like some selections.
We'll get that was another
syllabi.
question that I we'll get to later on. But yeah, the first thing, you're building an in-law suite.
Second thing, my wife had this idea for a non-profit secondhand store, children's secondhand store. We're going to call it a Giving Tree because the Giving Tree trademarked a Giving Tree, and it's a secondhand children's and infants, baby store because the 2 secondhand options in Farmville shut down. It's going to be entirely donated inventory, entirely volunteer workforce, and all of the proceeds will go to Farmville charities.
How do you anticipate people like the volunteer situation?
I don't know.
You figure it out?
We've already, we've had people say, "Oh, I would love to volunteer," but we'll see what happens when push comes to shove. Right now, we're at the point where we're starting to get the building ready, and if anybody knows any people that need small office space, I'm trying to rent out 1/3 of the building to pay the mortgage so that the nonprofit doesn't have to pay anything for mortgage.
That would be ideal.
Yeah. And then the third thing is we are fostering refugee children, and we probably will get placed in our home in late June or early July, a 12-year-old and a 7-month-old.
That's super duper exciting. Like so everybody keep Adam and Soraya in your
Please.
prayers. All 7 of you are going to listen to this.
Yes, that I can relearn my Spanish because although the 12-year-old knows a decent
the 7-month-old doesn't speak English.
Not yet.
Gosh.
Slacker. No Spanish either.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, those are some good big 3 things, man. How are you managing that?
I've tried to reinstitute a prayer regimen. I've had a prayer regimen, but tried to up it. And I'm also, so I'm just trying to get on a healthy schedule, go to bed at a good hour, get up super early. So my wife and I get up 2 hours before the kids get up so we can have 2 hours of silence.
You need to do those 2 hours of silence before the kids get up. It's like life-changing.
Yes. And now I'm running for a bit of it and
Nice.
Reading Aquinas for a bit of it, praying 2 different times of it. One of them is a rosary with my wife, and then I just talk to my wife, who,
She's a delightful lady.
she is.
We'll have to get her on.
You should. She'd be a great guest. I highly recommend everyone get yourself a sugar mama. Wonderful. Have I mentioned she makes more than me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
And at least once you've probably mentioned it.
But it's great.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it.
Well,
But I knew her back when she didn't make any money at all, so don't think I married her.
yeah,
for the
you're
money.
not a gold digger, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank
Actually,
goodness
I
for
can
that.
tell you when maybe you don't want to hear this sort of story on here.
I mean, I think I've heard the story.
Yeah.
We'll do a couple more. Like let's hear it.
Get to your question. I mean,
We've got plenty of time. We've only been recording for like 13 minutes. It's fine.
I know the exact moment when I knew I was going to ask my wife to marry me.
Can I guess it as to what
I've
I
already
think
told
it
you the
is?
story, probably 4 years ago.
You're right. You're right. I know it.
Yeah. Basically, we were in the friend zone because she had this my wife came to college. It was she had this lingering condition some high school girls have. It's called boyfriend. They probably should have broken up with before they came to college. Anyway, we were in the friend zone, and I was like, I'm going to impress her. We're going to go to the gym, and I'm going to lift some weights. I didn't impress her. But I was watching her, and she was waiting for the squat rack, which was a great sign. And then she was waiting for this baseball player, something at Wake Forest, where we went to college, to get off. And he's like clearing the weight, as you should. And she says, "Oh no, please just leave that weight on there." And then she put more weight on the bar and repped it out in his face.
That's pretty awesome.
And as I stood there admiring her perfect form and also her good squat technique, I realized
I
would have to ask her to marry me someday.
Well, that's something. I really hope that you were standing in front of her as you observed her squats.
I was definitely behind, across the room. I mean, I wasn't like 2 feet behind. I wasn't spotting her.
Just so everyone now knows that it sounds like you were a super perv.
I'm not.
I was observing her squatting from.
I was. Look, you know.
Look, you're a changed man. You're a different guy now, and you're married her. So
I did marry her. I intended to marry her in that moment,
and it worked out.
It just took another few years to.
Yeah. Way to go! Well,
Thanks.
There you go. You aired that out, and I made it.
I've
weird.
already covered all our my best accomplishments.
Yeah.
That and the kids.
All right. So why should anybody take your advice? Who in the world?
My advice.
Yeah. Not your advice. Good grief. Part of me wants to have my answer this phone call that my brother is currently calling me, just so that he can pester you about AI. But that seems weird.
Is he pro AI?
A little bit.
No, that's too bad.
Yeah, we'll have to do this another time.
Tell him to read my paper.
Yeah. Anyways, actually, I definitely will do that. I think I shared it on the social medias. Or maybe I commented on it. Anyways, so why should anybody value your opinion on virtue ethics, and what the heck are virtue ethics anyways? And yeah, we'll get to more questions as the time goes, but I can't keep track of more than one question at a time, if you hadn't noticed. So
do you want me to give you my whole educational background? Is that what you're saying?
All of it. Every minute no.
I'll give you a short rundown of how I got to the PhD.
Yeah, you were
going
to be a Protestant pastor at one point in your life.
Well, before that, I was going to be a medical doctor.
Ooh.
Because that's what my mother told me I wanted to be since I was very little. And I believed her. And like 1/5 of Wake Forest entering class, I was pre-med. And like a lot of those pre-meds, I didn't really want to be. You know, I volunteered at a hospital and was like, I don't really want to do what doctors are doing.
Fair, very fair.
So I dropped my pre-med, unfortunately, after I took organic chemistry. It really would have been good to do another science elective than that. But, you know, my wife and I bonded over that class, almost broke up twice. No, we didn't almost break up, but it was ugly. So after I dropped that, I had a lot of hours, you know, open up. I don't got to do all this pre-med stuff. And at the time, I was in an English class and a philosophy class I was signed up for. And both were interesting to me, but it seemed like English, I could write papers with any sort of thesis and argument, and it'd be fine as long as I was clever enough. But the philosophy professor I was taking, like, he called me on my BS. He's like, but that doesn't make sense. That's not logical. Your argument doesn't work out, no matter how clever you think you sound. And by the way, I wasn't really that clever. I just thought I was.
No.
Yeah. So I went with philosophy. It was just the most interesting. It dealt with really substantive issues that everyone should be interested in. Everyone should be interested in these issues.
Like what kind of issues?
Like what counts as a good human life? You know? Are we free? Does God exist? Things like that. You know, what's right and wrong? How do we determine what's right and wrong?
Solid.
Is right and wrong even the primary ethical categories we should be focusing on? Spoiler alert, no. Well,
it sounds like we're going to get
complex.
to that a little bit later.
So I majored in philosophy, and by the end of the philosophy degree, I was like, I just about know what philosophy is. And I started having a hankering to take more, do grad school in philosophy, but I'd already committed to. I was a late convert to evangelical Christianity. I was kind of raised as nothing, and then I converted. My parents got divorced. The home wasn't a pleasant place to be, and so I started hanging out with an alternative crowd, which at my high school was either the heroin crowd or the evangelical Christians. And
I'm so glad you chose.
I hung out with the evangelical Christians, and I hung out with a family in that small church, South Carroll Full Gospel. They preached the full gospel there.
Full gospel. They
met in a barn structure. Had carpet, no hay. But I converted to evangelical Christianity, and so I was bringing that into college. And so when I dropped pre-med, I decided, I should go pre-ministry. And my mom and dad at the time were like, well, shoot, you're going to go pre-ministry. You don't need to go to Wake Forest. That's an expensive place. Come on home to the, a local college. But neither of them were willing to pull me out because they were getting a divorce, and neither wanted to be the bad parent. So silver linings of divorce. Your parents won't pull you out of college when you tell them that you're going to be in pre-ministry instead of the pre-med. So then I went to seminary at Asbury Theological Seminary. I got an MDiv, Master's of Divinity, at a very Protestant evangelical seminary.
Didn't they just have like a big old revival a couple years ago?
Yeah. And I still know some people from there, and Facebook friends, and it seemed like what happened there was pretty legit. So exciting things happen. It was a great place. I learned a lot of good, despite it being evangelical Protestant. Spoiler alert, I'm Catholic and came into the Catholic Church about 8.5 years ago, almost 9 now. So I thought I was going to be a pastor, but then after a year there, I was like, you know what? I don't have the talents to be a pastor.
What do you mean by that?
Well, like when you think you're going to be a pastor as a young man thinking you've got a bunch of stuff to tell the world, you think, it's going to be all about the sermon, which is like 10% of your job is to come up with a sermon. 90% is making small talk with old ladies in hospital rooms, and I was not good at that. So I decided...
That's a lot of old ladies.
I mean, that's a oversimplification, but that's how I felt. So then I decided I'm going to finish this theology degree because I want good theology. And then I applied to go to start a PhD in philosophy at the school where my wife was getting her PhD in psychology. And so I started that PhD. I did 2 years there, but then my wife had, she had started the PhD 3 years before me because I was doing my MDiv. She finished and got a job at Longwood University. And so my PhD turned into a master's real quick. I just left there with a master's, and I, by the grace of God, was able to get into UVA, which is a very different PhD program. So I had to start over my philosophy PhD at UVA and did 5 years there. So if you're keeping track, kindergarten to 12th grade, you're in school for 13 years. Post 12th grade, I was in school for 14 years. 4 BA in philosophy, 3 MDiv, 2 MA in philosophy, and 5 PhD in philosophy. At the end of that time, my actual plan was to pour beers at Three Roads Brewery. I actually was about to turn in an application when I got this job at Longwood, teaching philosophy in the Honors College. Dreams do come true. So my time at UVA, I focused on virtue ethics, a lot of other stuff too, history of philosophy, political philosophy, philosophy of religion, existentialism. But virtue ethics was my specialty, Aristotelian virtue ethics, and especially Neo-Aristotelian virtue ethics. Right after college.
Which time college?
2007 is when I finished college, and that's when I got married.
Okay, so
summer of 2007.
Your first round with college is when you got married. After your first round?
My undergrad, yeah.
Okay.
2003 to 2007, as soon as I graduated. I would have gotten married during college, but my dad said, I'm not paying tuition as soon as you get married because you're an adult then.
Oh.
Yeah. So I came out without debt.
There you go.
And which was great.
Yeah, because this is super tangential, but like lots of people are like, well, I gotta get this thing done before I get that thing done, and I gotta wait till I'm...
I would have gotten married to Sarah freshman year if I could have, but
it makes
as soon as
sense.
that boyfriend was out of the picture.
Yeah, and you were like, yeah, I'm the...
As he was in late September.
Solid.
Yeah.
Solid. I'm glad that you've kept track of that over 15, 16 years ago. Anyways, all right, so back to where you are now. Sorry to get you off. When this show is the show of many tangents. We actually have considered the universal we, the royal we, changing the name to just tangents. But so you are now professor in the Honors College with philosophy.
Senior lecturer.
Senior lecturer.
Yeah, I have a safe, solidified job in the Honors College. I came in the Honors College at a time when they were rolling out a new gen ed, which means I got to propose like 8 courses. So I only teach courses that I've proposed and designed. So I only teach stuff that I love to teach.
That's
it's kind of
amazing.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, how does that's the autonomy that
rare
you have there is pretty impressive.
in academia. Usually, you get a philosophy job, you're just so thankful, and you teach 4 sections of Intro to Ethics at Directional State University, and Directional State,
I don't know what that means.
Northwest.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry.
These jokes
My
make
friend
more
is
sense
a little
than
slow.
academia.
The town is that way.
Dumb and Dumber quote for the win.
You're welcome. I knew you would like that. Oh my gosh.
I was way off. I knew it started with an S though.
Samsonite.
That's the movie I've seen third most in my life, and I could quote many.
Feel free to just throw them out at any point that it seems right.
It'd be funny if you could guess the other 2.
Big Trouble Little China.
That's number 1.
Rush Hour Tommy Boy, maybe?
Tommy Boy.
Is it? Okay. Wow.
Rush Hour.
That was one of my brother and I's jams. We watched that. We got it for Christmas one year, and for some reason we watched that because we had a TV in our room. I super don't my kids aren't gonna have TVs in their room.
No, that was a terrible idea of my parents.
Yeah. But we had a DVD player. We had a Super Nintendo, and we had the TV, and I think we had an N64 as well.
The pinnacle of gaming systems.
Dude,
there it is.
you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I still have it, and it still works.
Which one?
The N64.
Wow, those joysticks are still working?
Yes.
That's
I don't
impressive.
play it that much. I get it out once a year just to make sure it still works.
Nice. We'll have to have a
Super Smash Brothers, man. Who's your character?
probably Link or who's the other one? Star Fox. Those 2.
They're not bad.
Who's yours?
Pikachu, man.
Oh man, if I all right, well, so video games, I can.
I'm not great at video games, but I'm pretty good at that one.
Well, it's just it's okay. If you weren't good at, were you a Mario Kart guy or I was a Diddy Kong Racing person?
I had both, but I'm not good at either. The only game I'm really good at is Super Smash Brothers, which means it's the best game.
Right. That's how that works.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm good at this. This means it's the best.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I know GoldenEye is good, but I was always terrible at it. Get annihilated.
Well, that's my older brother was better at every single video game than me of all time. Still better. And actually, this is sort of obnoxious. My brother is better at probably 90% of any hobbies or it's annoying, Is
he better at starting a podcast?
I mean, he hasn't tried yet, so I wouldn't know.
Well, let's just assume not.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he would have done.
He'll probably listen to this. So, shout out to Buck. Cheers to my older brother who.
Buck, I dare you to start a podcast.
I dare you. Yeah.
Show Leo up.
Yeah, and you guys. Then you could go on his podcast and debate on AI.
Oh, I'm ready.
No, I think you have a pretty solid argument. He's really good at playing devil's advocate. I don't think he actually likes AI. Anyways, again, we're changing the show's name. Your tangents are here. Where were we before?
I gave you my credentials of why people should listen to me about
virtue
ethics. So my specialty at UVA was University of Virginia was Aristotelian virtue ethics or Neo-Aristotelian virtue ethics. So Aristotelian virtue ethics would be virtue ethics that goes back to Aristotle, who was the best student of Plato, who was the best student of Socrates, who is the beginning of Western philosophy. Technically, Thales probably was the beginning of Western philosophy, but we don't talk about those pre-Socratics much. Neo-Aristotelians are just Aristotelians that are alive or recently dead. who revived Aristotle's virtue ethics. So with the revival of virtue ethics, Aristotelian virtue ethics was the main form that was revived. And now, thanks to people like Alistair McIntyre, Philippa Foot, Rosalind Hursthouse, I mean, heck, my advisor, Rebecca Stengel, or Talbot Brewer, my second reader at UVA. Now it's one of the three main ethical theories on offer in philosophy departments, in English-speaking philosophy departments, along with Kantianism and utilitarianism. I'm a recovering Kantian myself.
What's the problem with Kant?
Kant gets something really right? And what he gets really right, the most intuitive part of his system, is his second formulation of the categorical imperative. I'm sure you're familiar. Treat humanity within yourself or anyone else always in yourself.
Slow
Treat
down.
humanity.
Look, I'm a simple man.
Treat humanity.
I'm just a nurse, okay?
Treat
I'm not
humanity,
a doctor like you.
whether in yourself or anyone else, always as an end in itself. As an end in itself, never merely as a means. That means you can't treat people like tools, because they're not tools, even the ones you want to call a tool. Right? They're human beings. They deserve respect. They're capable of making decisions based on reasons, and so you have to give them the opportunity, which means you can't lie to them, you can't coerce them, you can't use them like a mere means.
You say that's
respect them as an end.
Like the heart of Kantianism?
Yes,
Kantianism?
that's what everything is based on. The problem with Kant is that's not all of morality.
That's just a one face of it.
Although this is an oversimplification, you have to oversimplify if you want to talk quickly about things. For Kant, he misses a lot of things that we should care about with the ethical life. So he gets that really right, but morality just sort of reduces to who can I praise and who can I blame based on how they respect people. But ethics is so much more than that. The ethical life is so much broader. What we care about when we care about ethics is so much more capacious than that.
Stop using your big words.
Okay. Now, utilitarianism sounds really good at first. Just
until you're the person that can't be utilized for anything.
Yeah, utilitarianism just says in one of the forms, maximize pleasure and minimize pain with whatever actions open to you for whoever might be affected by your action. The problem is it leads to moral horror.
Yeah.
Because it allows you to basically shaft minorities to benefit majorities, or really disrespect and disregard one person for the benefit of five. And so it leads to all sorts of really bad implications.
Yeah, you end up with Nana's kind of a burden now. We're just going to euthanize her and chuck her in the clay.
Yeah.
Because she's no longer useful.
Yeah. The amount of pleasure she experiences is outweighed by the pleasure that we could experience as a society if we reallocated the resources that's used to keep her alive and care for her to other people. Well,
so that's a hard thing, especially in healthcare these days, because we see so many of these nanas who are, I don't want to use the word vegetable or anything, but and I also don't want to oversimplify this, because this is a topic that a lot of healthcare workers now struggle with. Is we have a very nobody, I think, really wants to recognize that we have a very finite number of resources within the healthcare system. It's a broken system. People have heard that. I argue that the healthcare system has not been whole since the nuns stopped being the ones that provided care, essentially. And even then, it had its problems, right? But we have so many issues within the system, and we just don't have this gold standard ivory tower. Everybody gets $1 billion workups. I don't know what the actual number is, but I know at one point it's like 90% of people's healthcare costs come in the last 2 years of their life. And you're like, well, this is kind of insane that we're spending this much money. And in the United States, it's like $1 trillion, multi-trillion-dollar industry is healthcare.
Yeah.
So we're using all of these resources to keep people alive who otherwise would have been dead a long time ago. So it's really difficult when you have patients who don't follow any medical advice. They don't take care of their bodies. They don't do anything for themselves. And I'm not talking about the ones who like traumatic brain injury after a car accident who are now like in the quote unquote vegetative state or whatever. I'm talking about people who are like still semi-active, who, you know, maybe they're on dialysis and 47 other comorbidities, and they're not taking care of themselves. So they come to the hospital and it's like, oh, this is a legit emergency. Like, this person is probably going to die if we don't do something. Spoiler alert, this is the 14th time this year that they have been in this situation, and they have, I hate to say it like this, but they've cost the taxpayer, they've cost their neighbor, you know, a significant amount of money, and they have not been at all useful. They've just been drinking and pissing their life away. They obviously haven't demonstrated care for their own life or value for their own life. Why should we, the caregiver, care for?
You all should see the furrow in Leo's brow right now.
Yeah. Well, this is the reality of the situation.
Hey, man.
So, and I really was excited to have you on, because this is something that, like, I feel like virtue ethics touches on pretty heavily.
I don't know that you're gonna want to. I do teach bioethics, but I don't teach a unit that would. Well, I teach a unit on euthanasia. I used to teach a unit on...
I don't agree with euthanasia, but it's a weird place to be in when you're like, hey, man, unless you start showing signs of life or signs that you actually give a dang about your own health, we're not going to keep doing this, because it's an exercise in futility.
Yeah.
You're going to die if you don't amend your life, and we can only save you but so many times. Like, at one point, it's going to be your last chance. And we're not going to know that.
Well, medical science will catch up with my vice. Ozempic.
Actually, I don't think Ozempic is the villain that a lot of people claim it to be. Because what's going to kill you first?
I know nothing.
What's going to kill you
stuff,
first?
By the way,
the heart disease from your obesity and your terrible lifestyle choices, or this medication that makes you hate food, so you lose 40 pounds in a month and like change your lifestyle drastically. I'm not saying I'm for it, but what will kill you first? The unknown side effects of this drug that's sort of new, or
I wasn't saying Ozempic is harmful. I have no idea about that.
I know. I just had to.
I was just saying it makes the more difficult road of. And look, this is. I'm saying this as someone who, in the Easter feasting season, his pants got too tight, and now he's trying to lose some pounds.
Why do you think I started running again, despite this foot problem that's gonna?
And just stop running. Running. I mean, like, what are you running from?
Sadness. Shout out, Tony.
At least it's not what Tom Cruise is running from, whatever that is.
I don't know. I don't know what Scientology. Shout out to Tom Cruise. He went to Steubenville University. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah.
No.
100% he did.
No.
He dropped
Franciscan?
out. Yes. F-U-S.
No.
I was there at a conference and a priest told the story.
I'm actively not believing you.
Hey, man, look. You can choose.
You are fibbing.
I'm not.
Really?
Yeah. We can look this up.
I mean, look, I believe you.
We live in I know you don't agree with smartphones, but.
Yeah, for those that can't see, which is everyone, I have a dumb phone I'm holding right now.
All right, just to prove this.
Here, listen to it close.
Oh,
such a good. I'll do that one more time. Oh, that sound. Quick plug for dumb phones. They will make your life less convenient and also better. Look, you don't have to. See, this is the problem with smartphones.
You didn't believe me. You said you were
I now believe you, all right? I just want to make sure you were serious.
Whoa. AI overview?
Ugh.
Tom Cruise did not attend Franciscan University. However, he did attend a different Franciscan seminary in Cincinnati, Ohio.
A seminary?
Yeah.
What?
All right, so that's crap.
Can you imagine Tom Cruise being a priest?
There'd be no Mission Impossibles.
I could live with that.
I could too. Top Gun, though?
That's hard.
Look, I could live without it. If he was a priest, I'd be all about it. He obviously is charismatic. He's created a whole friggin' whack job religion.
He didn't create it. L. Ron Hubbard did.
You would know. You were also a...
I've seen the South Park episode, so I know pretty much.
Wow, you deplorable human being.
Oh, Leo.
Oh, where are we now?
So you wanted to know about virtue ethics?
Yeah, that was the thing. That's what your dissertation was on that I read.
Yeah.
I read it. The whole thing. All 200.
You have lengthened the list of people to read it. All of it. There was 4 people on my committee. I trust that they read it. They said they did. And no one else.
247 pages of it.
Yeah.
Let me just
say... You
say...
didn't read the bibliography?
No, I didn't.
You should.
So...
It's got some bangers, as the kids say. I mean...
No. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, oh, look at that. Julia Annis, Virtue Ethics and the Charge of Egoism. That paper changed my life.
Stunning.
Intelligent Virtue. Oh, Elizabeth Anscombe, Modern Moral Philosophy. The first, foray into why Kantianism, utilitarianism, modern moral philosophy is not enough. Anscombe also a Catholic.
Hot diggity.
Yep.
Yeah, so I feel like getting into your dissertation, obviously we're not going to be able to distill that out into a podcast. This would take quite a bit of time.
I had an elevator pitch for it.
Let's give us your elevator pitch. And
you don't want to know what virtue ethics is first?
Actually, I do want to do that. I would think that would be included in the elevator pitch.
No, I can't explain what virtue ethics is and my dissertation. That's sort of the background.
Elevator pitch for what virtue ethics is.
A lot of people think virtue ethics, I got to start with the concept of virtue. No. Start with the concept of eudaimonia. That is the Greek.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Eudaimonia.
I read your whole dissertation and it was like eudaimonia.
Oh.
Admittedly, pneumonia, eudaimonia, healthcare coming into this.
Eudaimonia.
How do we know you're not pronouncing it wrong?
Technically none of us do because none of us were there. Nobody speaks ancient, Attic Greek anymore. So maybe they did pronounce it that way. But they didn't. Eudaimonia. So eudaimonia is a Greek term. It's hard to translate. A bad translation would be happiness. A better translation would be human flourishing. Okay, what it is to live a good human life. So in other words, Kantianism and utilitarianism, these modern moral theories that come out of the Enlightenment, they start with the question, what should I do? And then secondarily, they ask, what sort of person should I be? Virtue ethics reverses those. They say, what sort of person should I be? What sort of life should I have? And then they ask, oh, hey, thanks.
Water. We're not just drinking beer.
Then they ask, what should I do? So eudaimonia. So that's the central concept of virtue ethics. And actually, in the ancient world, this just made sense. You start with what is a good human life? Not what is an ethically good human life, just good simpliciter. So your life can be good in non-ethical ways too. You could have something really crappy happen to you through no fault of your own, or something really good happen to you, and that would make your life go better, even though you're not to be praised or blamed for it. So,
give us an example.
Well, you could get hit by a bus.
Definitely a
You're
negative.
Crossing the crosswalk, you have the light, and some bus runs the red light, and you get hit. Not your fault. Your life definitely goes worse. Maybe you die or break your back or something, right? You could win a bunch of money with a lotto ticket. I wouldn't say that's really ethically.
I feel like most people who
praiseworthy.
win the lottery, statistically, end up worse off afterwards.
Yeah, it might not go well for you, but anyway, I'm sure I would do well with it though.
Hasn't worked well for anybody in the past.
So
but that could work for us.
So what counts as a good human life? Now, I'm not going to go into nitty gritty, but
nitty-gritty.
But I can give you some broad brushstrokes. So for the Aristotelian, in order to determine what a good human life is, you need to determine what a human life is, just whether it's good or bad. Ask this question: what are the component parts of a human life? What make it up? Not biologically, but biographically. What I mean by that is we're not talking about like, oh, food and air and water. We're talking about like if you think about a human life, what are its parts? If you read a biography, what are you reading about? Well, you're reading about activities.
Yeah, what people did.
What people do, what they did. If you're awake, you're not asleep, and you define activity capaciously enough.
What does the word capaciously mean?
Just widely. Bigly. Let's use bigly. If you define activity
I really
bigly
was hoping
enough
for something better than that. Like
if you define activity widely enough, almost every moment of your life you're doing something. You're listening to me talk. As long as you're actually paying attention, that's an activity. You're looking at a piece of art, that's an activity. You're running a lap, that's an activity. You're asking someone to marry you, that's an activity. You're brushing your teeth, that's an activity. Everything, mundane, momentous activity. Your whole life is made up of activities. So in order to know if you have a good life, we need to know if two things about those activities, at least two things. One, are they relatively worthwhile? And two, are they done relatively well? We got to know if they're relatively worthwhile activities because, well, imagine this. Let's start with the done relatively well first. So we got to know they're done relatively well. Why? Well, imagine someone who everything they do they fail.
I'd prefer
Like they
if
go
you
to
didn't, like throw me under the bus. Like
they
that.
go to take a test, they fail. They go to brush their teeth and they miss their mouth and they stick their toothbrush up their nose. They go to take a drink of water and they pour it down their shirt. They go to have a conversation and someone gets bored and walks away. They go to ask someone on a date, they get rejected. They go to on a job interview, they don't get the job. Now look, I wouldn't necessarily blame this person. You know, who knows why they're failing? Maybe it's through no fault of their own. Maybe they don't have a lot of gifts. Maybe I would even admire them for persisting in their life, even though they're failing at everything. But I wouldn't look at that person and say, wow, that's a good human life. No, that's a terrible life. We should hope better for them. We should hope some successes. We should hope they do some things well. So in order for your life to go well, the component parts have to go well. You have to do the activities relatively well, at least a good number of them. And secondly, the activities have to be relatively worthwhile. For example, imagine someone who is the best at counting blades of grass. They could go out on your front lawn and they can count every blade of grass as accurately as anyone else on earth, as quickly as anyone else on earth. They have achieved excellence in blade counting. Do they have a good human life? Aristotle would say no, because what they're doing is worthless. It has no point. It has no worth. Now, some of my students push back me on that because they're like, well, if they really enjoy what they're doing, isn't that good for them? No, it's not. Aristotle thinks there's an objective standard. Look, there's a wide variety of lives that could count as good, but there are boundaries.
I just found this.
And blade counting is one of them.
Page 22. A life devoted to counting blades of grass is lacking because it is dominated by an activity that, no matter how expertly undertaken, is without much worth. It's amazing that I was able to find that. Sorry, I have his manuscript right here, his dissertation.
Hashtag
no hashtags.
Flourishing together.
Oh, I can definitely make that a hashtag.
You don't hash anymore?
A tag.
Hashtag sad. Sad.
No, I'm trying to go through my notes because, like, as you're saying all this, I remember reading it, and I'm like, oh yeah. I had things written down, so I'm gonna make sure.
So now
we have questions for later.
What a good human life is. It's the component parts are worthwhile activities done well, and now you might be asking yourself, well, I thought we were talking about virtue ethics. What does this have to do with virtue?
Well, what is virtue?
Well, let me get to that by saying this. Virtues are character traits.
Okay, like what we have up there.
Sure. Yeah.
For all of you people who haven't looked, this is an image or a picture done by Virtus Catholic on here of the 7 capital virtues: patience, charity, chastity, kindness, humility, temperance, and diligence. There are probably other, kind of translation.
There are many virtues.
Yeah, those are like the 7
Yes.
capital virtues.
They're very important ones.
capital.
So, virtue... Capital. So
Seems
virtues,
like you were
virtues are
looking at
character
Tombstone
traits.
with that statement, weren't you? That's what you thought.
Doc Holliday, man.
Oh man, this is why I like you,
Best Val Kilmer's best role. You're gonna say The Doors
No, I'm not. That's
or
definitely-
Iceman.
No, it's definitely his best role.
Okay, good.
What was he? Wasn't he Batman too?
Not his best role.
Anyways,
Batman Forever or whatever it was.
I don't know.
Ugh.
All right, back to virtue ethics.
So virtues are character traits, which are just dispositions. So a disposition just means you're disposed to do certain things and feel certain emotions and desire certain things when the time comes. So if you're an honest person, you're disposed to tell the truth, but not all the time. Like if you saw someone walking down the street saying the sky is blue, Barack Obama used to be president, like rocks sink, like you wouldn't think they're honest. You would think they're crazy. The honest person is someone who tells the truth when the time comes, when they're asked a question, and it's time to tell the truth. So a disposition is just being prepared or disposed to behave accordingly when the time comes. So a virtue is a character trait that disposes one to act well when the time comes. How are virtues related to the good life? Well, the good life is worthwhile activities done well. Those are its component parts. The virtues are character traits that help you achieve worthwhile activities done well. They are dispositions to act well when it comes to these worthwhile activities. Now, I said virtues. I haven't said ethical virtues yet. So you could have a virtue in anything. You could have a virtue of a hairdresser. Maybe there's a worthwhile activity of fixing people's hair and, or laying bricks or like
I choose laying bricks despite
playing
the last name
mahjong.
of barber.
And you could have a virtue in all those activities. You could do those well. The ethical virtues then are a subset of all these other virtues. Now, what are the ethical virtues? The ethical virtues, we can get at that by another route. There's two central arguments in the first part of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and I feel like we could maybe in brief go into them now. I don't know.
It's rocket, man.
There's the function argument, and then there's Aristotle's famous definition of a human being. So let's talk about the function argument. You familiar with the function argument?
No, I got you here so that I could get my own private tutoring session.
Aristotle says that in order to know if something is a good thing of its kind, you need to know its function, and so you can tell if it's serving its function. If it can serve its function, if it can act out its function, then it's a good thing of its kind. If not, it's not. Start less complex, go more complex. So the easiest way to see this is to start with a human artifact. So like, what makes a good knife?
This is a question you're asking me.
Yeah.
Its ability to cut things.
Yeah, its function is to cut. So what would make it good?
Its sharpness.
There you go.
Maybe its length.
A good knife is sharp. What makes a good spoon? Is a good spoon sharp?
That would be unpleasant.
No. A good spoon is not sharp because a spoon has a different function.
Scars.
Yeah, you'd cut your mouth up, right? You want to put food in your gullet with a spoon, so a good spoon is not sharp. So spoons and knives differ in their goodness because of their different functions.
Ah.
Now, it gets more interesting when you get to living things. Like, what makes a good tree?
I suppose it depends on the species of the tree.
Well, think about it in general.
All right. So a fruit-bearing tree, I would assume its goodness depends on its ability to produce fruit.
So it can reproduce.
Yeah. So it can,
Yeah.
and a shade tree, its ability to produce foliage so that it's actually producing shade.
Well, I don't know. So I mean good, not for us, because I love a shade tree, but good for itself, good as a tree.
Well, it depends on its purpose. Like if that tree is a shade tree, wouldn't its ability
Is that
to
its
produce,
purpose for us?
No, well, it's a purpose for itself. If it's a poplar tree, its ability to produce leaves and like its own flourishing.
Yeah.
And if it's not able to produce leaves or a large oak tree to produce acorns or something like that, I would assume that its ability to do that which it was created for. But I think this like the underpinning of this means that there's a
The more standard answers would be like deep roots, so it doesn't fall over in the wind, or
yeah, I guess
chlorophyll and sun hits it and magic happens and it gets energy. I don't know. I forgot biology.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm not
I don't know anything.
I
about
dropped
biology.
my pre-med.
That's
pretty
right.
quickly.
Yeah. Am I complicating the question over here?
No. A lot
All
of
of my
lot of
listeners
times
are
my
just
students a lot of times my students go, oh, well, if it has shade, because then we could sit. It's like, no, not a
for
tree
us,
good
yeah.
for us. What makes it good as a tree just by itself, even if we didn't exist?
Yeah. So it'd be its ability to like exist and live and function
Flourish.
of its own.
You could look at a tree and be like, that tree is flourishing, or that tree, it's not flourishing. Like, you just know. You can tell. Now, it gets more interesting and more complex when you get to animals. So, like, what makes a good cat? And here I don't mean like your
Fluffy
lap
is
cat.
so nice.
No, I mean like a cat that's like outdoors. It's like prowling, hunting. It's doing cat-like things. What makes a good cat?
Its ability to sustain its own existence
Okay,
without
so
being
specifics.
Without it requiring. I mean, I'm thinking of like a big cat, not like a house cat.
Well, I mean like
You mean it,
like the same size as a house cat, but it lives
like a barn
outdoors. It's
cat.
doing cat. Yeah, barn cat. Yeah. What makes a good cat?
A good barn cat would, or this is how my
But not
thinking
for your
is.
purposes.
Yeah, not for my purposes.
Yeah.
But its ability to like exist in its environment and thrive, like it's able to hunt well, catch mice, eat them,
Yeah.
live and not,
It's got sharp claws, quick reflexes, tail for balance. It can jump and pounce.
Yep.
Yeah. It's stealthy. Good cat. Now what happens if that cat experiences a tragic farming accident and loses its back half? Say it survives. It's dragging itself along. Say you suture it off or whatever, and it's you're petting it on your lap.
I did once work in a farm
Question.
where there was a 3-legged dog that was a cattle dog, and it herded the horses, but it carried a ball in its mouth that had like it was a weird ball that it could carry in its mouth, and it would use it to sit one. So it would like put it down, and it was amazing.
That's a dog that's adapted, but I'm talking about a cat with only
sorry.
2 legs. Now, here's my question.
a cat.
Remember,
A 2-legged cat.
remember,
isn't,
not for your purposes. Is that a good cat? I don't mean do you say good cat. I don't mean do you ethically approve of it. I mean, is that cat flourishing?
No, I would say it's not
It's
flourishing.
not.
It's not able to function
It can't do cat-like
as
things.
it's intended.
You might love that cat. You might pet it and pamper it, and it might be good for your petting and pampering, but it's not a good cat anymore. Now, the thing that makes human beings way more interesting than all these other things is you probably know someone without the use of their legs.
I know people without legs.
You might know someone who doesn't have the use of the legs or doesn't have the legs at all that has way better life, is flourishing way more than someone who has the full use of their legs and limbs. Because human beings have a function that's more complex than a cat or a tree or a knife. They have a function that allows for a great variety of good lives, including ones that take place from a wheelchair. What is the function of a human being? Right? The function of a human being, according to Aristotle, is activity of soul in accord with reason. What's the activity of soul he's thinking about? Making decisions, executing actions. So it's really just practical reason, doing stuff guided by reason. Right? Squirrels don't do stuff guided by reason. They just act on the strongest impulse, and then they go to the next impulse. It's like, I got to get nuts, and now I got to form a nest, and now I got to go have sex with another squirrel to make more squirrels. Right?
No, they're like, now I need to run in front of your vehicle. Now I need to spaz.
But-
Plump, plump.
But human beings, they could have a really strong desire, and occasionally, sometimes, doesn't happen all the time, sometimes they step back from their desire and they go, what? Do I have a good reason to drink this 18th beer? Do I have a good reason to? Now, probably at the 18th, you're not thinking in reasons, but like, do I have a good reason to drink this 4th beer? Or should I not? Right? Do I have a good reason to tell this person not the truth, or do I not? So human beings can really greatly desire something and not do it because they think they have a good reason to do otherwise. That makes them different than squirrels. This is what I tell my kids all the time. When they say, I don't want to do that, it's like, well, it's fortunate for us that you're not a squirrel and you can do things
that you
don't want to do.
I'm going to have to start using that.
I use it all the time. My daughter is already rolling her eyes.
Yeah, well, just so you know, there's no ophthalmologists around, so you shouldn't make her roll her eyes too much because a retinal tear is a serious problem.
I will. So that's the function argument. So now we know. So Aristotle says, look,
before we get further, like, do you need to take a break? We've been at it for an hour.
Like to pee.
I mean, if you need
pour
to pee,
another beer,
that sort of thing.
Sure. I don't know. I didn't know you had that ability to break.
Yeah, I don't pause. We'll cut out at 59 minutes or so.
This is a first-rate operation here.
I wouldn't say that, but all right. Make sure.
Now that's a potent beer, Leo. It's a sipping beer.
That's a sipping beer. Well, I didn't chug the first one. It took me an hour to get through it.
16 ounces. Yeah. We're talking about Aristotle.
That's true. I mean, look, I'm not a philosopher, so it does help me to have a little
I'm not
beer.
a philosopher either. I teach philosophy. This is the distinction.
Yeah. Well, round 2, before we get into, what was the next piece?
So just went over the function argument. And really, Aristotle he thinks that, you determine what counts as a good human life by determining what the function of a human is.
Yeah.
Now, you might say, well, what does activity of soul in accord with reason have to do with virtue? Well, the virtues help you execute activities in accord with reason. That's what the virtues do. The virtues aren't dumb habits, they're intelligent habits.
Makes sense. I like that. Virtues are intelligent habits. Because I think to cultivate
in some
virtue,
ways, habit is a misleading term, but it's the best we got.
Yeah, I guess that is true. It's not because
it's not like unthinking. The virtuous person knows what they're doing. They're
and
wise.
Choosing to do it.
They're practically wise. You know what practical wisdom is? The Greek term.
The Greek term for practical wisdom.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a joke.
No,
based on your facial
it's not. It's not a pun.
Okay, go for it.
Phronesis.
Shout
out to Tim. Tim would have had a pun there.
He definitely would.
Olmsted.
I missed that guy. I haven't talked to him in a while. Anyways,
Tim Olmsted.
What a guy.
Keeping our lights on.
That's true.
Thanks,
okay.
Tim.
Back to while there's a slight opportunity to shout out this tropical beer hug from Goose Island Beer Co.
Now, Goose Island Beer Co. is a solid brewery. They have a really solid. Their standard IPA is really good.
This is delightful.
Yeah. So, I think another good way to get at sort of what Aristotle's trying to get at is to start with his. And this actually get the essence of virtue ethics, I think, and round us out.
Keep talking.
All right, Leo's searching for a pen.
There it is. I was sitting.
So Aristotle has a famous 3-word definition of the human. I suppose you know it.
I don't know why you assume that I.
3 words describe the human, and it's not featherless biped.
That's only 2 words.
Which is only 2 words, yeah, but it's the one everybody.
I can at least.
Featherless biped.
I
mean, we are featherless bipeds.
3 words. Go for it, man. Don't put me on the spot.
Rational. Social. Animal. I thought you were gonna jump in there. Rational, social, animal.
I told you I couldn't read your dissertation and Nicomachean Ethics at the same time. I'm pretty sure
I put it in there in the first half of the first chapter. But all right, so
do you want me to pay attention to what I read? Read it.
The fact that you read it,
but no, I haven't read it.
My own father, I think, got to chapter 3.
Don't be throwing anybody under the bus.
What? That's further than most people got.
Set, O Lord, a guard over my lips.
My brother got to chapter
4.
And you got through chapter 5, which is amazing.
It was. I mean, I'm not gonna lie.
It's not the most scintillating text.
it was difficult at times. I think some of the footnotes were great though. What was the one about your great uncle?
Oh no, my grandfather.
Your grandfather. Okay.
Oh yeah, his brother, my great uncle.
Yeah. Tell this one
Before we get into Aristotle's three
before-
definitions.
That's
right. So I totally just found a place I could shove this because I just wanted to tell a story about my great uncle. So my grandfather grew up on a Depression era farm, and so food not plentiful, clothing not plentiful, but there were standards still then, and this story illustrates one of those. So my grandfather's brother was a little portly, despite the the scarce food. He was a little portly, or a lot portly, and he went to the outhouse one day and he lost his coat down in the pit of the outhouse. Poor kid. And he came out and went to my grandfather's dad and was like, "Dad, you got to help me get my coat back." And he's like, the dad's like, "Well, Joe, you're not going to wear that thing again, are you?" And he's like, "No, but I had a biscuit in the pocket."
That's a great story.
And somehow I justified putting that in my dissertation.
And it made it. It made it in there. Well, it was a footnote, so not necessarily.
Also in my acknowledgments, thanks section, I thank a fictional alter ego of one of my friends.
Not Carl.
Teddy. Anyway. So rational social animal. Let's start with the animal part first. If you're an animal, you have a body, and bodies give rise to needs and desires. And if you have needs and desires, you move your body out in the world and you interact with the world in order to satisfy your needs and desires. That's just what it is to be an animal. You're an animal. I'm an animal. There's no shame in it. We're animals. But we're also social animals, which means we satisfy our needs and desires best in social groups.
Well, so do monkeys.
Correct. We're not the only social animal.
So do
there are
wolves.
bees and wolves and dolphins.
I'd much rather prefer to be a wolf or a dolphin than a gorilla. Just so you know. But let me tangent you again. 100. I know you've heard this at this point. 100 men versus one gorilla. Who wins?
100 men?
I don't have an answer. This hasn't been proven. This is just a thought.
I mean,
Mr. Beast hasn't offered people the $1 million yet.
Can we not watch 100 men try to beat up a gorilla? That would be sad.
No, it's to the death.
Yeah, I don't want to see that.
I don't either. Somewhere in Asia, it's probably happening.
Oh, okay.
And that's
No
how.
comment.
And that's how Vitals and Virtues got canceled.
Beep, beep. Beep.
Just in case anybody was
So,
wondering, that was
you're an
his
animal.
sound of
You have a body. Gives rise to needs and desires. You go out in the world. You satisfy those needs and desires by interacting with the world. You're a social animal, so you do better when you satisfy the needs and desires in social groups, cooperatively. But here's the kicker. We're a very special sort of social animal. We're a rational social animal, which means we can organize our social lives rationally. Now, what does that mean for a virtue ethicist? For a virtue ethicist, that means you can organize your social life such that people can satisfy their needs and desires together, such that they can flourish together, right? Such that me satisfying my needs and desires does not preclude you from satisfying your needs and desires. We can harmonize our flourishing. We can flourish together, which is the title of my dissertation.
I think.
Now, you might be asking yourself, what the heck does this have to do with the virtues? Here's what it has to do with the virtues. The virtues are character traits that help us to harmonize our flourishing. They organize social life rationally. They make it such that people can flourish together. Think of any virtue. The easiest one in this case is generosity. If you're a generous person, if you're truly virtuous in generosity, you don't just know when it's time to give money out of your excess. You actually want to give money out of your excess. You actually desire to do it. You enjoy doing it. That's what it is to be generous. It's not just to do it, it's to enjoy doing it.
What is it when you don't want to do something that you know is virtuous, but you do it anyway, but you do it begrudgingly?
You're merely continent. which is better than being incontinent or vicious. Continent. But if
So
you keep
for all
being
you
continent, you'll
all-
be on your way to virtue.
All you nurses out there who are like, he's continent, thank goodness I don't have to clean up a
I
Code
do
Brown.
make a urination joke in my class.
Urination. Solid. I'm going through my notes here, and I don't know. You can tell me if this makes any sense. Tangent.
But let me just
Well,
finish real quick.
Sorry.
So, what was I talking about?
Don't ask me.
so,
Continents. No, that was
virtue-
my question.
Yeah. So the virtues will organize social life rationally such that people can flourish together. Just give it an example. Think of a generous person. They don't just know when to give. They enjoy giving. Now, imagine you're in a community where someone, through no fault of their own, is in desperate need, and you have excess. This person who's in desperate need really desires to gain aid. The person with excess desires to give aid. The person that desires to gain aid and the person that desires to give aid, that harmonizes, right?
Yeah.
All the virtues are like this. They harmonize social life such that we can satisfy our needs and desires together. The vices do exactly the opposite. The vices make it such that you have a constant series of zero-sum games where someone has to win and someone has to lose, right? The vicious person does not want to give aid. The person in desperate need wants to get aid, and someone's going to get their desires and someone isn't.
Well, I think you mentioned this in the book, potentially at this point in the book, in your dissertation. It's like a book. I think you mentioned Ebenezer Scrooge in his early phase in this, which is funny that Ebenezer Scrooge, I think, is the same name as the uncle in the book Kidnapped, is Ebenezer. Essentially, both of these people are recognized as misers who they just desire, like, it's not covetousness, it's miserliness. So these two vices that, honestly, it's probably a little of both, but they have so much, they're so greedy, and they are so like desperate to have more at the expense of the other person, that they don't recognize their ability to, like, I think they recognize their ability to help their fellow man, but they don't accept it, or they won't do the thing that they see the need for until this outside force shows it to them. Now, Ebenezer in Kidnapped doesn't do it willingly. He pedals. Have you read the book?
No.
All right, it's super good, super fun. You could read it in like 2 hours. Maybe not. I think you read it the same rate I do.
I'm a slow reader, actually.
Essentially,
my
like,
wife is a very quick reader.
I think it's just dudes in general just can't read fast. I don't Neanderthal. I don't know what it is. But anyways, these characters, you have Ebenezer Scrooge, who this outside force kind of smacks him in the head and shows him what he needs in life, and is able to, break out of his old ways and become a new man. And he ends up flourishing together versus what the third ghost shows him is a miserable, lonely death. Like, it's super fun when you can look into these stories like that and like kind of pull from it and gain these virtuous thoughts at least, and then try to put them into practical application. But
A Christmas Carol is
it's my favorite.
great story.
I read that like out loud to the kids at least every other year so far. Admittedly, my kids
I keep telling my wife we need to start a tradition where we read it out loud.
Do it
during
Advent.
leading up to Christmas. But she always is like, it would take so long.
No, it won't. You do one chapter a night. They're not long chapters.
Yeah,
I've done this, but we do the Gospel of Luke starting at like the 1st of December.
Well,
and
what we do is we always.
He said doo-doo.
What we do, drink. Oh man, I hope we don't start talking about rugby drinking games later.
No, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
Definitely not.
Not that I didn't participate in them. I
You were the designated
witnessed
driver.
them. I was babysitting people making bad decisions.
Yeah.
I didn't drink till I was like 22.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do on a rugby team.
Yeah. Well, so back to like I don't know if this kind of ties in I don't know if you've felt like you've completed enough of like a summary of some of this dissertation.
Well, I've just completed a summary of what virtue ethics is. So a good human life is made up of worthwhile activities done well. Virtues help you do worthwhile activities done well. The ethical virtues help you to... The virtues...
Can
Can
you give me a short like definition of what the ethical virtues are?
The ethical virtues structure situations of choice that come up again and again and again for rational social animals. So think about it this way.
I had come up with like my super short like 3-word definition is essentially being true, fair, and honest, which might be oversimplified.
Yeah,
but at least for the common simple nurse.
Well, I'll get a little more complete.
You went to school for 14 years for this, so I feel okay.
The ethical virtues, so they govern realities of human life that all humans at all cultures have to deal with. So all humans in all cultures have to deal with anger, fear, having a little, as long as you're not indigent, having a little extra and deciding if you're going to give it away or not. How much pleasure are you going to enjoy and when and with whom and how much, temperance deals with how you're going to enjoy pleasures. Like the ethical virtues deal with universal human realities and they deal with well,
it seems like the ethical virtues essentially can go to the theological, like the 7 capital virtues of temperance, humility, kindness and charity, and prudence and diligence. Like it does seem that they fill into those pretty well. I mean, and you think about the person who's generous, like that's a charitable situation. Like it ties in very well, and maybe like the oversimplification being true, fair, and honest. It is oversimplification, but if we can marry them and just try to...
I just like the way to describe them as there's these things that human beings have to deal with. They're universal human realities like anger. And so there's a virtue, there's an ethical virtue that deals with them. So for Aristotle, a virtue is always a mean of excellence between 2 vices. So you can always go wrong in 2 ways. So when it comes to anger, you can feel too much or too little. There's a right amount of anger you should feel.
Righteous anger, perhaps.
Well, his virtue is called mildness, which kind of clues you into the fact that you most of the time should not get angry.
For all you people out there with toddlers and children, this is not that I'm speaking from a place where I've mastered this.
Kid, right?
It's impossible not to. I'm pretty sure. Kids do the dumbest things.
Yeah.
But then you got to think like I was that dummy once.
My son, he went through a very tough phase in his 3rd to 4th year of life where he was just like foaming at the mouth at bedtime, and it was bad. And you could see him getting angry, super angry, and he just wants to say or do the thing that makes you hurt the most. And one night he was just like yelling and screaming. He's so angry. He just was and like he can't, like it's impotent rage. Like he can't do anything to hurt me. But he's like, "Daddy, I'm gonna throw your eyeballs in the trash."
Whoa.
It was all I could do to keep from busting out laughing, which you shouldn't do to a kid that just tried.
It makes it way worse. I found that out.
But yeah, I think the virtues are just ways to structure situations of choice that come up over and over again. Like you're always going to have to deal with how to deal with anger, how to enjoy a pleasure, or how to deal with excess that you have to give away or not, or how to... Are you going to tell the truth or not? Like these are just universal human realities, and so the ethical virtues deal with them. They structure them such that people can flourish together. That
I've found, especially regarding how humans can flourish together, I think, and this is gonna, maybe this will anger some people, but I think it speaks specifically to a lot of the healthcare profession and nursing. Do I say the thing that's on my mind that is unkind about somebody else, whether it's true or not? I mean, say you've heard it from a reliable source, but like essentially gossip. something that I have passed on a handful of times is something true, kind, and necessary. I don't know where this originates. It might be like a Aristotelian thing.
Isn't that like related to the rotary?
I don't know.
I think that's
like
the
a
rotary thing.
phone? Like, what are you
So
talking
my my father-in-law is in Rotary Club,
Yeah.
and I think at their meetings, their thing is like, if you're going to talk, is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary?
Yeah, my brother's the one that passed this along to me a couple years back, and it has stuck. And I tried to like kind of live with that in mind, because it's super easy in any conversation that starts out where somebody who's not present gets mentioned, and you're like, oh, even if it starts out good, like, oh man, Adam is such a solid dude. Compliments kind of go, and then if at some point it always seems to turn to but this one time he was a total weenie. Like it's just like it happens, and I think to always keep this idea of is it true, kind, or necessary at the forefront. Like that's this practical application of the virtue of like maybe temperance in your words, like. I said this earlier, and I try to say this at least once a episode, is like, set, O Lord, a guard over my lips, keep watch at the door of my mouth, which I believe.
I've listened to several episodes. I've heard it several times.
Yeah, thank you. But it's Psalm, I think 140 or 141. I don't remember the verse, but it's something that I have to deal with, because that's one of those things that if you want to flourish together, you're not going to do this. You are not going to flourish if people are concerned about what you're going to say about them, or I'm concerned about what somebody's going to say about me. Honestly, I don't really give a rip what people say about me, because if you live that ethically virtuous life, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but like if we live in such a way that we have no cause for shame, then like nothing anybody can say or do will be truly like harmful to us, especially if like our end goal is heaven. Like I'm not going to do something that's going to cause me shame before our Lord. And if it's not shameful there, then it's probably not shameful in front of you. But like, because
the world may see it as shameful.
Well, if the world sees it that way, then
it's
like
a crazy place.
What did Jesus say? Like, if the world hates you, it hated me first. So in that regards, like,
true.
Thank goodness that the world hates me. But I mean, I'm not saying I'm good at this. Like, this is all a work in progress. But that's kind of the end goal. Like you want the oh man, this is how I always go. I run out of steam. I get so excited, and then I just fall apart. I'm basically just hoping that you'll prop me up with some sort of.
Got nothing, man.
Sweet.
I was just talking about Aristotle.
Yeah, so just live your with regards to flourishing together again. True, kind, necessary, and how is it that we go on from there, Adam?
Well,
with being ethically virtuous, because that's kind of it, right?
Yeah. So
we've just summarized
Aristotle produces a list, and it's always fun to produce this list of virtues for the students because it's incomplete. Like he admits it's incomplete. He says, "People after me, wise people in time, will fill in the list." Because Aristotle really. It is an incomplete list, not just because you can get way more detailed and nuanced with virtues. He has like a list of 10 or 11 or 12 or 13, depending on how you count them. But because Aristotle is writing like 350 years before Christ, and the ancient Greeks just didn't have some virtues that Christ basically brings onto the scene. Like they don't have anything like charity. Like generosity is the closest they got, but it's not the same as like compassion. It's not until Jesus comes on the scene and changes the way we view the human. Like ancient Greeks just didn't view humans the same as we do. Like, for example, take the story in the Gospels where Peter is told he's going to deny Christ 3 times, and he's like, "Oh, I definitely won't. No, not me, man." Paraphrase. So he's in the courtyard. Jesus is getting the business from the Sanhedrin, and somebody's like, "Oh, Peter, you're one of his disciples." He's like, "No." And so he denies Jesus 3 times, and the cock crows.
You like my sound effect?
And what happens then? He goes and weeps.
Yeah.
Now, in the ancient Greek world, that would be... Peter's a nobody. He's a uneducated peasant. He's a fisherman. At best, that would be a point of comic relief. Like, his feelings don't matter. But in the Gospels, it's clear that this is meant to be a point of high drama. Like, Peter's shame and sorrow matter. His emotions are important. Why? Because the Gospels have a different way of viewing the human than the Greeks do. The Greeks had a way of viewing the human that most people weren't fully human. Like 20% of the population were slaves, 50% were women, and they weren't fully human. According to the Greeks, not me or Christians.
Well, that's the thing that's interesting. The view of other human beings as property, which we don't look at other human beings as property these days. Like, thank goodness for that. But it is a strange disconnect that we like. It's very hard, I think, at least for myself, to fathom the idea that, like, oh yeah, Adam, you're my property now. I can beat you if I want to. Like,
yeah. Well, some people were just naturally, that was their lot, and it made sense to everybody. But the Christian revolution of how to view the human, it's hard. It's when I teach Intro to Christianity to my students, when we get to this part in history, it's like, I tell them, it's really hard for us to fathom just how revolutionary this would be, because we live on the other side of it. Even, most of you might not even be Christian, but you live in a post-Christian culture where you just take for granted that everyone is fully human. Like, that just wasn't the case in the ancient world. So it's just hard to fathom how revolutionary the change with Jesus is. Even Aristotle, as smart as he is, can't quite grasp that everyone has the image of God imprinted upon them. And so where do we go from here? Well, I think ultimately Aristotelian virtue ethics gets you a long way, but to complete it, it's good to...
Would you say that it's completed
augment with Christianity?
Yeah, it's essentially completed within a Christian moral framework.
It comes to completion, but I think if you're going to stay in a non-Christian worldview, you're going to, as close as you're going to get to sort of a Christian ethics, will be something like Aristotle.
Yeah,
but if you're going to come all the way, you got to have Jesus.
Which is, 100% accurate. Like, you need Jesus. Something that I found interesting, that I was super pumped that I stumbled across this recently. Apparently, Martin Luther referred to Aristotle as a total dummy. Are you familiar with this?
No, but it makes me respect Martin Luther even less.
So he basically said that he was unintelligible and that Christians had no business taking any of his work seriously. And he claimed that he was incredibly well-versed and understood Nicomachean ethics, better than anyone. He claimed that he understood him better than St. Thomas Aquinas. And
he did not.
Yeah, so it's super interesting because you have different people where St. Thomas Aquinas... he was very Aristotelian, if I'm not wrong, right?
He was. Aristotle was being revived right before Aquinas starts studying. So his mentor, St. Albert the Great, was one of the first scholastics to really revive use Aristotle. So before Albert the Great and Aquinas, the main philosopher to do Christian theology with was Plato. And so the traditionalists were all Platonists. Augustine is a Platonist. He's just a Neoplatonist. And
Wait, I don't really. So, I mean, again, I'm no philosopher, and at some point I'm going to ask you. We'll re-ask the question: where do you start if you're going to get into philosophy? But what is the difference between Aristotle and Plato? Because if they were,
how long do we have?
Yeah, no, I know we don't have enough, but so if was it Socrates, Plato, Aristotle?
There you go.
Okay, so why is it that for some reason Plato was taken as like okay, but not Aristotle? This is probably not
two reasons.
the right time to ask
Two
this
reasons.
question.
One is Aristotle was lost and Plato was available for a while.
Why was he lost?
The
road systems and
the
the day were bad.
happenstance of history. Like we don't have. So this makes me almost want to cry. We don't have any of Aristotle's published works. None of them. We know they existed. We know he wrote dialogues just like Plato.
Where do we get the Nicomachean Ethics then?
These are lecture notes. They're very well organized, very well edited lecture notes.
So all we have essentially is lecture notes.
So
do you have lecture notes?
So yes, and if I were to be judged by them, I would feel bad. And so just keep in mind when you're reading Aristotle and you're like, he's a little dry, Plato's so much more fun. Yeah, because we have Plato's published works. We have everything he ever wrote, probably.
What happened?
We don't have anything that Aristotle ever published. We only have his lecture notes.
What happened to Aristotle's works that we don't have? I mean,
they got lost to history, just like 95% of the rest of ancient literature.
Yeah, okay.
What we have are
essentially,
the stuff that
and most of ancient
made
literature would have come out of Rome, I presume, and then Rome was sacked and burned and destroyed.
Yeah, the only reason we have what we do is, in large part to Benedictine monasteries that just copied stuff over and over again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Saint Benedict.
Dude, I'm a big fan of Saint Benedict. On my rosary here, Saint Benedict.
He's a good one.
He is. So many saints.
Ora et labora, man.
Dude, I need to. This was something that I wanted to get going a couple years ago, and it still needs to happen. Is essentially like establishing Benedict days, where
come over to the building that I just
come whatever the project that you have in your local community, like especially like guys, like, and I know my average listener, which is who knows how many people actually are listening to this,
dozens upon dozens, Leo,
if I'm lucky.
Just about the number of dollars I make teaching at Longwood, dozens upon dozens.
Well, the principle behind the idea Benedict days is like work and pray, that sort of thing, is get up with a couple guys in your local community and like be together. Like the most peace I find, honestly, and this is sort of like to my shame or something, I don't know, maybe it's just the way I'm made, is if I'm actually engaging with other men and working hard at something to produce something that is lasting and good, not counting blades of grass and praying. Like those three things, like I can definitively say when I'm doing those things, I feel the most peace and like security in my life, because it's I don't know, it's hinged on, my relationship and an identity like as a Christian, and also fostering like the growth and eudaimonia.
There you go.
However I want to say it.
Eudaimonia.
Like that human flourishing with my fellow man.
Leo. Message received.
Yeah.
This fall, Fantasy Football League. I got it.
That's look. To me, fantasy football is like cutting the blade. They're counting the blades of grass.
No, I've never done a fantasy football league. I follow football. I follow sports so little. It's so sad. I mean, maybe it's not sad, but like I'm happy when I hear the Green Bay Packers have won.
I feel like maybe this is similar to you, and my brother will appreciate this. I used to be so absurdly obsessed with the Washington Redskins. Like I would pray rosaries hoping that they won, like praying that they would win.
Sad.
So sad. I mean, I was like 16. But like it would cause me such grief and anxiety and like depression if they would win or lose or whatever. And I'm like, this is idolatry. And then, I have family members who have their redskin rooms or, whatever. Like the walls are painted a certain color and there's pictures and
Bleed
stuff.
maroon and gold.
And then I think, yeah, exactly. And I'm like, that's cool and all, but if you're, and honestly, that's not even necessarily a bad thing, provided your love for Christ exceeds that. But if it doesn't, now I understand our faith is all.
Jesus catch a button hook,
Yeah, not even a Hail Mary pass.
Definitely. Wow.
So, oh man. Said, "Oh Lord, guard over my lips, keep watch at the door of my mouth." We don't want to say anything heretical. He may have caught a Hail Mary pass.
Jesus didn't catch a help.
He may have played games.
Football wasn't invented. What are we talking about right now?
I don't know. He may have played games. This is where the episode
I'm sure he played
falls
games,
into shambles.
but he
Everybody,
didn't play football.
yeah, maybe they had their own version of a Hail
there
Mary
was a
pass.
game. It was super fun. All the Jewish kids played it.
It probably so.
Yeah.
But but
Out in the
so this
schoolyard.
is where it gets into the
Hebrew
problem with that sort of thing, and because I think professional sports, there is a level of eudaimonia that can happen within that. Like obviously, you look at a team sport, they are flourishing. Is what they're doing worthwhile? Well, it pays their bills. It allows their families to grow.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could make the case
Sports
that
are an interesting example. It's always a borderline case of like what sports count as worthwhile. I mean,
curling. Are you saying curling is not worthwhile?
hey man, have you ever watched curling?
I don't think I have actually.
I once got snowed in. It was early in my philosophy time at UVA.
Yeah.
And I once got snowed in Charlottesville. I drove from Farmville to Charlottesville, and like I had to just like the guy I was staying with, which I could not leave because there was like 8 inches of snow or a foot of snow.
What year was this?
It would have been 2012, 2013, somewhere in there.
Okay.
He was obsessed with women's curling, and the Olympics were on, so whatever the Olympic year was. And like we just watched like 10 hours of women's curling every day, and it was fascinating.
Was it fascinating that people are that fascinated with that sport?
I mean,
I almost
I'm
feel like
convinced
women's
it's
beach volleyball would be less odd to be obsessed with.
Yeah, well, because there's a bunch of corn dogs in the world, Leo. All right, but these women are fully clothed.
I'm not saying. I love your self-dubbing there, but I'm not saying that you should go about like wanting to watch women's beach volleyball. I'm just saying that seems like the
both
more
are great
natural.
athletes, but all I'm saying is
I don't even know.
Curling is more interesting than you might think.
Okay, all right, fair point. Point taken.
Although my friend was only interested in women's curling, which was kind of weird. Like, why were the guys
see,
not
that's what I'm
interested?
saying.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird.
I don't know.
Like, there's
He found it more
bobsledding,
intriguing.
there's snowboarding, there's skiing.
What were we talking about?
I don't even know. Have we finished? Have we exhausted human flourishing? And
I feel like you wanted to talk about vices or what keeps people from achieving virtue, but maybe we're.
I mean, this is the beauty of what it is we're doing. I really actually was hoping at some point. No, this is something that I don't think I've told you.
Do you have any remaining questions?
I've got lots of questions. I've got all the questions. Not really. Yeah. Well, this was my one thought on page 29, 30.
Page 29, 30.
Each phase of life can capture a eudaimon.
Eudaimonia, man.
Look, man, these are big words for me, and I've had just enough alcohol that I'm a little tongue-tied. Capture a eudaimonia equilibrium when it can recognize the state of life it exists in the time of the existence. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that.
Need the context.
Yeah, the context is in what Nussbaum observes that with Aristotle's luck plays a larger role in the life of the virtuous and human good, is recognized as a fragile one. Tragedy can strike and
Yeah.
otherwise, life can be marred or made impossible.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's where
This is where Aristotle and the Stoics disagree.
well, this is what I think. Like, this is kind of the example of the cat that doesn't have 4 legs, or some animal or a person that doesn't have all
Not
of
a
the.
good cat.
Well, and this is the difference with the animal versus the human, where despite not having, say you're a paraplegic, but you can't walk, you can't do anything, but you still have an intellect, you still have a mind, you can still like study. You've got, Stephen Hawking, like, not saying his spiritual views were anything worth having, but he did have an intellect and he was able to think and study and do a lot of things despite his lack of
Ability to move.
Yeah, despite that.
Yeah.
So it is difficult within the human.
You ever read The Brief History of Time?
No.
Hard book. It's good. Recommend it.
Yeah, but that's the thing where it's difficult. I mean, I don't think we're gonna hash this out. We briefly touched on this earlier about the, essentially, there's a word that escapes me, as they often do. Utilitarian.
Ism.
Yeah, utilitarianism. The isms, the tism.
I have students that say utilitarianist.
Utilitarianism.
My blood boiled. There's no such thing as a utilitarianist. There's a utilitarian. And there's utilitarianism.
Okay,
There's no
fair point.
utilitarianist.
So how do you? I mean, help me figure this out, because this is a struggle that a lot of healthcare providers are experiencing right now. Is you have Nana or Grandpa, who's 80-something years old, 70-something years old. It's very poor health, but we're going to do absolutely everything possible that we can do. We're going to break his ribs. We're going to put tubes in every single orifice of his body so that he can exist. And maybe he won't exist for long, but it might give us 6 more months. He might never say another word. We don't even know if he's able to understand what we're saying. But we're going to keep him alive on a ventilator for another 6 months. We're going to cut his throat open and put a trach tube in him so that a ventilator can breathe for him. How do we freaking navigate this when we're like, and I hate to go back to, this is where the utilitarianism stuff creeps in, is how do we justify spending, I don't know, $1 million keeping Grandpa Joe alive when he might not have even wanted this to happen to him, so, but he's got a trach and a ventilator, and this medical bill is astronomical. Nobody will ever be able to pay this off. He needs a tube feeding, so he's got a tube in his belly that we feed him 3 times a day. Like, what are we doing here? Like, and I have to have this conversation with plenty of doctors and nurses, and we're all kind of the mind like, this isn't healthcare. This isn't a good.
Yeah.
And do you have an idea of what Aristotle would say about this?
Aristotle wouldn't have the faintest idea of this possibility. But I imagine, you could adapt Aristotelian ethics to say something about this. I don't think you have to say, so there might be, so I don't think you have to appeal to utilitarianism to say that this is not a great situation. Virtue ethics might have something to say about a good death and when it's okay to just allow someone to die and not take extraordinary means to prolong life.
Mm-hmm.
Prolong biological life, but perhaps not biographical life. Like, the person you're describing does not have much of a biographical life anymore. They have a biological life. They're excreting, they're breathing, or having a machine breathe for them. They're gaining nourishment, but there's no biography there.
Yeah, their biography is, well, they laid in a bed, they were turned every couple hours by the nurse,
So-
or fed every couple hours by the nurse.
So,
or
there might
medicated.
be a case to just allow people like that to die without extraordinary means being taken to prolong their biological existence when their biographical existence has ceased. But this seems different than the euthanasia approach, which seeks to end biological life. Not
Well, how
when
do
it
you
needs-
define euthanizing this person who's sustained by artificial means for a prolonged period of time with, and I'm not talking about the 30-something-year-old who's on all of these measures that there is potentially a chance for them to recover. I'm talking about 80, 70-something-year-old person who's on these artificial means of sustaining of existence or life. When do you pull the plug? And is that person and is that staff member guilty of murdering a person because they pulled the plug? This is a weird situation that we find ourselves
I
in.
think the Catholic Church, I would trust their bioethicists more than I would trust myself right now. But
what do they say? I don't have
I
that
mean,
on
they
here.
basically the view is not pursuing extraordinary means to prolong life is not the same as killing.
Yeah.
It's just allowing to die.
Well, and I've been the person that has pulled the plug and stopped medications from.
But
this.
if you
So-
are administering a lethal agent to someone who otherwise would continue on their
So therein lies the difference, whether you're administering a lethal agent or withdrawing care.
Yes. So
Okay.
you're withdrawing extraordinary means to extraordinary means. It's not like so if someone is just kind of feeble and you withhold food from them, that wouldn't be extraordinary means. But if someone can't breathe on their own and they're non-responsive and you keep them alive by putting them on a ventilator, that would be extraordinary means.
Yeah, because there's
Right.
also these social cultural factors to consider. Whether can the family? This is where it gets weird to me. Can family afford this? Is this going to say I died or my wife, me or my wife was in this situation where we had to be on a ventilator, and these extraordinary means. And it was pretty much concluded they're not going to recover from this, and we're gonna keep this going for another month. That extra month is $1 million worth of medical bills. So that would be quite the extraordinary means. It's hard to say it on that front, but that's essentially where it comes out, is where it's hard, because when it's 80-year-old grandpa, we withdrew care and that's fine. But I think because there's a woman right now who's on life support, and her family, she's pregnant, that's why she's on life support. There's been no neurological activity on this for this woman since she's been intubated.
Her
She had
baby has
her baby is apparently doing fine.
goodness.
So in these weird ethical dilemmas where you're like, well, we're keeping this woman alive for 7 months at this point because we knew she was pregnant. So we're just going to keep her on this ventilator. And it's just
Man, I'm glad I don't. I'm not a real doctor.
no, this is not in our.
I'm the wrong
our
kind
facility.
of doctor, as my mom would say.
This isn't. This is, I think, happening in Alabama, maybe right now, but or somewhere down south. But these are real questions that I think a lot of people have rightful questions about. What do you do in these situations? I mean, I'm not gonna have the answer, but I do think. Why I got you on the show is essentially philosophy, and understanding these principles helps us guide how we engage with life and the difficult questions that we're going to have. any, I don't know how better to like kind of summarize it, but
You just need to go to the UCC.
USCCB's
the bioethics page, and
so what that is the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops bioethics page, which we'll put a link in the description to that, as well as Adam's dissertation in case anybody would like to peruse
it's
that.
for free, available for free at UVA Library. You can access it today and read all of it.
It's gonna
You'll be number 6.
It will be in the description. And that's if you finish it.
If you finish it.
I don't know, because
my own wife has not read it.
She read a lot of it, and she
probably
heard
a lot of it.
She heard a lot.
I hashed it out with her.
Yeah. Do you? I don't know. I feel like that was a hard thing that maybe we're not going to be able to answer that. Like, but if you want to take a stab at that question,
I do not.
Yeah. Because it's like, well, just yank the plug one, Nana.
You have you're talking about the pregnant woman or Nana? Who are you talking about right now?
Well, I think it's easier to make the decision for Nana, who's 80 years old, lived a wonderful life, and we're going to keep her alive on life support. Or we're going to pull the plug because she's lived a good life, and this is her time. It's very difficult when it's a younger person. I mean, how many like national news situations have you had? Was it Terry Schiavo was back in the early 2000s?
Yeah.
I don't know what the name of the woman is.
But that was really, she seemed to have signs of some sort of conscious life, as opposed to,
Well, she was on a ventilator for a prolonged period of time, and essentially the spouse wanted to withdraw care.
Yeah.
And that's
the parents did not.
Yeah, so that's a weird place. It's a super weird place to be in. I think if anybody has any desire to kind of dig into this specific topic more, there is a podcast. It's the Catholic Man Show. They had a radiologist who was one that talked about a case years ago where a fellow was in a ATV accident, was declared brain dead by the physicians, and then a family member scraped his heel with a jackknife, and he responded, and it basically undermined all of the American Neurological Association's definitions of what brain dead means. And anyways, that radiologist had a very good take on a lot of this. So if you want to hear some more about that, I would definitely reference that, and I can put a link in the description for that. But it's a weird place, and I don't think there's necessarily a broad stroke answer for a lot of it, because essentially each situation is different.
Well,
say you're a super duper wealthy person and can afford the medical bills for your wife to potentially stay on life support until maybe she starts having, brain activity, and maybe she does recover. Or maybe you're dirt broke and no, this will put you in a poorhouse for the rest of your days.
This does highlight one facet of virtue ethics, which is that it's very situation specific. So Kantianism and utilitarianism, these Enlightenment theories of ethics, they're famous for coming up with one principle, the categorical imperative for Kantianism, the principle of utility for utilitarianism, and they govern every single situation. And as long as you know how to apply the principle, you know what to do in every single situation.
It seems helpful.
It's lovely. Aristotle basically says that's a fool's errand. Any principle that could address every single situation would be so convoluted with so many caveats that it would be practically useless. And so Aristotle thinks it's actually impossible to come up with a principle that governs every single situation.
I have one. Can I throw it out there?
Do the right thing. Do the virtuous thing. Yeah.
Can you sleep at night after you make the decision?
If you make it if you make it broad or vague enough, then yes, you can. But if you make it one that can actually guide your action, it's you can't. One principle won't cover everything, because ethical reality is too various.
What about what would Jesus do?
There you go. But that's a virtue ethical principle. That just says do what Jesus would do. But
we
how
don't-
do you know what Jesus would do?
That's a good point.
You have to consider
have
the
to-
virtues. So instead, Aristotle says, don't worry about the principle. Worry about becoming a certain sort of person so that when you get into the situation, you will know what to do.
Say that one more time.
Don't worry
don't
about-
burp into the mic.
Don't worry about learning a principle. Instead, become a certain sort of person such that you know what the right thing to do is when the situation comes.
Well, couldn't that principle essentially guide that person? Like, I am this way, and this is the principle that I reference. True, kind, and necessary. That's a principle.
Principles are great, and principles can be really can guide and can be great rules of thumb. But you're
it's
never
not-
going to
the
find a
principle-
principle that guides every single situation unless it's so general and vague such that it's not very helpful.
Yeah.
Like do the right thing. Okay, that principle guides every situation.
WTF is the right thing. Well, the principle isn't the person, and each scenario is very unique.
Yes.
Anybody who's existed on this earth for more than like 5 seconds.
So Aristotelian virtue ethics is often classified as a sort of particularist ethics.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the particulars of a particular situation are what call for, whatever is ends up being the right action. It's also sometimes deemed situationist. Particular situations call for certain behaviors. Shout out to Dancy, Jonathan Dancy. If anyone wants to read the foremost book on particularism. Fun fact: uncle to Claire Danes. Anybody know who Claire Danes is?
Yeah, for all of the people in our live audience.
In the live audience. Do you know who Claire Danes is?
No.
You don't know who Claire Danes is? Oh, you're so young. I forget. She
you
played
are like 8 years
Juliet
older.
in Romeo and Juliet. Also, My So-Called Life. These are things that were on when you were like in middle school or elementary school.
Joke's on you, I was homeschooled, so there was nothing.
You still at school. Any other questions you have for me?
Well, I'm flipping through my notes here. I promise I'm trying to listen really well. There was something, the virtuous. Well, before actually, I think we can pause there, because I have the bladder the size of a thimble. I'm gonna go deal with that, and then we can come back for some questions, like very specific questions.
Sure. You gotta get up at 8 a.m. tomorrow, or before 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
Both of us.
Yeah.
I gotta go to the early mass because you're having breakfast over at my house.
That is true. We are doing that. I'm super pumped.
About the breakfast?
Yeah, man. All right. So the any
No mimosas over at my house. We're not gonna have any mimosas.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's why we drank our alcohol tonight. The virtuous feedback loop of transformation. I highlighted that.
Yeah. That's in chapter 4?
I don't know. It's page 108. When you where I highlighted it.
Oh no, that's not chapter 4.
I
That's
don't-
chapter 3.
You really know your own dissertation. That's just good. Yeah, let me find some better notes.
I mean, if you want, the main concept, the only original idea I've ever had is the concept of enmeshment.
I just hit that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a
Such that one's flourishing comes to partially constitute another's and vice versa.
Yeah, so enmeshment. Talk about that for a little bit while I find better notes.
Well,
that I could-
because the component parts of human life are activities, and because the component parts of good human life are worthwhile activities done well, you could ask yourself this question. So if the component parts of good human life are worthwhile activities done well, what about joint activities? Well, joint activities it's the case that the same activity is a component part of one person's flourishing and another's at the same time, such that if one person is working towards the excellence of this shared activity, then what are they doing? Simultaneously, they are working towards their own flourishing and the flourishing of someone else. So it's just the case that the flourishing, a component part of the flourishing of someone else can be the component part of my own flourishing via joint activities. It can also be the case that someone else's flourishing comprises my flourishing because my flourishing is partially constituted by theirs, because I've taken as one of my important goals their flourishing. So if I'm generous and I want to benefit somebody, it would seem that my activity of trying to benefit them would go better if they actually, flourished and were benefited. And so my activity actually goes better if they actually flourish. So their flourishing is a component part of mine because I've adopted it as one of my goals.
So this is, doesn't Aristotle talk about like 3 different kinds of friendships?
He does.
And you would know these better than me. What are the 3 different kinds of friendships?
Friendships of pleasure, utility, and character friendship. He also, the last one he calls the perfect or best or virtue friendship.
Because it encompasses the previous 2, but also incorporates essentially willing the good of the other for the sake of the other.
Yes. So friendship in general is goodwill towards the other for the sake of the other is the most perfect type.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in a utility or pleasure friendship, you will the good of the other for your own sake, because if the other isn't doing well, they won't provide you with pleasure or utility. But when you will the good of the other in a character friendship, it's because you know enough about their character to know they're good, and you want to see good things happen to them, no matter what it, does for your well-being.
How does this might be a difficult question, or like, where does virtue approximation, or do you have a good definition of virtue approximation? All I have is a note. Like I said, I read this like months ago, and that
Sorry,
was
we should have done this earlier, but
well, that was my fault. It was
busy.
difficult to look. Life happens, but what is virtue approximation?
So this is a point of debate among virtue ethicists, but I'm of the opinion, and many virtue ethicists are, that virtue comes on a continuum. So you could be more or less virtuous and still count as virtuous. So in other words, there's a character trait, and you're trying to approach it, and you're not yet virtuous yet. But you could pass some line where you count as virtuous, but you could still be more virtuous. And so there's... But before you get to that line of virtue, you're approximating the virtue. You're getting more and more virtuous. So
You're faking it till you make it.
Yeah. So Aristotle thought most of us aren't virtuous or vicious. He thought we were in those 2 interesting categories in between, either incontinent or continent. And what it means to be incontinent or continent means...
You pee your pants or you don't.
So it means you have strong desires contrary to what you know to be the right thing. So the incontinent and the continent person both know what the right thing to do is, but they have desires that are strongly contrary to the right thing to do. And so it's an uncomfortable position because your desires are in battle with your reason. And so the question is, what's going to win out? For the continent person, the reason wins out and you do the right thing. For the incontinent person, your desires win out and you do the wrong thing. So approximating or habituating virtue involves doing the continent thing, doing the virtuous thing over and over and over again until it becomes second nature. Aristotle thought we were second natural beings, and I think this is largely true. You don't become fully human without developing a second nature. Naturally, you're born not able to do much. Eat, sleep, excrete. But second, naturally, you develop a language, you develop certain skills and talents. You become fully human as you develop second natures.
But what about that person that's
And virtues are second natures.
So the virtues being second natures makes sense. All right, I'll toss that question out. Virtue does not guarantee eudaimonia.
Yeah, so this is another controversial point. Aristotle and the Stoics depart from each other here. The Stoics famously thought...
Who are the Stoics? All I know is Marcus Aurelius would be considered a Stoic.
Seneca. Being the other... there's a lot of them, but Epictetus. So the Stoics thought that virtue was sufficient for flourishing. No matter what happened to you, if you maintain your virtue, you would flourish. Socrates sometimes talks like this as well. When he says, no one can harm a good man. Why? Because true harm is harm to the soul, and harm to the soul is only harm that you have to voluntarily take on by debasing yourself. And so if you maintain your virtue and don't debase yourself, no one can harm you, even though they clearly can harm your body.
This is surprising. This is coming from Socrates, who was not a Jew.
Not a
I
Jew.
assume he was a pagan of his era, which would have made
He
sense.
believed in the immaterial soul, though.
Which is, I mean, this is fascinating to me because I think, was it...
He had an argument for it, too. In the
Thomas
Phaedo.
Aquinas talks about basically, despite wherever you're born or wherever you've existed in the time that you have existed, you have this natural inborn knowledge or ability to discern that you have been created for more than what you are. Basically, there is a creator who's created you, and there's the body and the soul. And I think Socrates, based on what you just said, seems to have nailed that. Despite...
It's shocking how much the Greeks got right.
Yeah, I mean,
prior to Revelation.
Without I suppose there was probably some Jewish or Hebrew or however you want to word that. There's some influence, but probably not a ton. I wouldn't guess, because they wouldn't have
had a lot of interaction with Judaism.
But yeah, so you have all that, and here is this great thinker of old who predated Christ, and he recognizes the soul. That's this thing, and what he meant by what the soul is, I have no idea. But it's super amazing that
he meant a ghost that is trapped in the body. So it's not a Judeo-Christian notion of the soul. So Aquinas' notion of the soul is something that is the form of the material body.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship is very close. For Plato and for Socrates, the soul is trapped in the body and would be most natural outside of the body. But in Christian metaphysics, the soul and the body belong together. Like a full human most naturally is a soul and a body together, not just a soul.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Christians look forward to a resurrection, and the ancient Greeks look forward to the soul escaping the body. It's not the same thing, despite what,
Well, the resurrection of the body is
to.
essentially the reunification of the soul and the body.
Right. So you're not in your perfected state until the body and the soul have come back together. And this is something that the Greeks would have thought was ridiculous, because, well, the body was the problem. So in Greek cosmology, God, or the creator, is not really a creator. It's more of a maker, and is co-eternal with matter. And so God is a spiritual force, matter is material. All of our problems stem from the material. And God just sort of had to deal with the material. It was here, co-eternal with God, and he just sort of had to make do with it. And so all of our problems stem from the material, from the body. And as soon as our souls can escape our body, then we'll be better off. But the Judeo-Christian view, the Christian view is that, physical reality is good. It was created on purpose. Souls and bodies belong together. And so the resurrection is something we look forward to. It's not this, but for the Greek, it'd be this very weird thing. Like, you finally escaped. You want to go back to that, dung heap.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to go back to a dung heap either, right?
But it's going to be a new body, apparently.
Yeah. Apparently. No.
I'm looking forward to my hips working again so I can deadlift more.
I was thinking that as you're talking. I'm like, it'd be really nice to not have back pain.
Definitely not bitter about having to stop deadlifting 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll be bitter about not being able to run. All right. Last couple of questions. So first, so somebody that's trying to get an introduction to philosophy, are there any books that you would recommend, or
how old are they?
I don't know.
Are they high schooler?
Anybody that's
college educated?
Look, if you're interested in getting into philosophy, it probably doesn't matter how old you are.
So there's a couple different routes you could take.
There's two schools of thought.
I'm partial to reading primary sources, but I'm going to give you a secondary source. So I'll start with a secondary source. So Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, SEP, although if you type in SEP to Google, it won't be the first thing that comes up. But Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is a free source of philosophy articles online. All the articles have been written by legit philosophers, and you can just type into the search bar in the website any topic in philosophy, and there'll probably be an article that comes up. The article will be like 15 pages, broken up by section, and so you can just go and learn about any area of philosophy. And they're basically geared towards college-educated people that haven't necessarily read philosophy before. Yes, sometimes they can get a little dense, but they're accessible to people that have a college education. So I highly recommend that to just get the gist of any area of philosophy you want. As far as primary sources, I mean, you can't go wrong with Plato. The Hackett volume of their 5 dialogues is really brief.
What are the 5 dialogues?
The 5 dialogues in this slim Hackett volume are the Meno, the Euthyphro, the Apology, the Crito, and the Phaedo. And if you read them in that order, you get a nice dramatic setup. The Meno, you see Socrates at his, doing his thing, which involved angering noble Athenians by making them look foolish because they say they know something. And Socrates asks them questions and reveals they actually don't know what they think they know. And he did this enough times that a bunch of noble Athenians brought him up on trumped up charges and condemned him to death.
Sweet.
So he's on his way to court, and the Euthyphro, he has this dialogue with someone about the Euthyphro, what comes to be known as the Euthyphro dilemma.
Yeah, I think I have that, like a paper copy of that. Or
Yeah,
a book of Euthyphro.
Is what's good because God approves of it, or does God approve of it because it's good?
Well, that's fascinating to me that they think, this is a bunch of Greeks, right? Like, these are people who have multiple gods. Like, what is their...
Well, the Greek philosophers, they pay lip service to the many gods, but it looks like they're pretty close to monotheists. They think there's one supreme God.
I mean, which makes sense.
Aristotle definitely thinks this. Although it's much different than the Judeo-Christian God.
Yeah.
Plato thinks this. He talks about the good as if it was God, and Socrates seems to think this as well.
Nice. All right.
And then you go to the Apology, which is his trial. Crito, which is him, someone saying, "Hey, you should escape," and him making the argument, "No, I shouldn't. I owe it to the Athens to suffer the punishments because I've lived under their benefits all my life." It's got all these arguments for why you should have a duty to obey the law.
So
dialogue of the Phaedo.
Stop moving around. The mic is in one place.
The last dialogue of the Phaedo is where he's talking about, he's arguing with his friends about, right before he drinks the hemlock and dies, is the soul immortal?
So, who's the author behind these ones?
Plato.
Okay.
Socrates is the main character of Plato's dialogues.
Socrates didn't write.
Never wrote anything.
Yeah, but Plato was a student of Socrates who basically just learned and
Socrates thought philosophy was irreducibly social and you couldn't write it down. You had to just do it with people.
So,
Plato kind of thought this, which is why he wrote everything down in dialogue form.
That makes sense. So in addition to what was the website?
Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
And then if you wanted to have maybe a bit more depth.
The Hackett volume with those 5 dialogues, you just type Hackett volume 2nd edition.
So you could essentially get PDFs to whatever you want. And then you could also get
you can get
the works of Plato.
You can get a sort of antiquated translation of Plato. Probably the Jowett translation is free online.
Yeah.
But there's so much to read in philosophy. It's hard to just
to nail it down to. Well, this isn't like this is the one book you have on your island. This is where do you get started?
I mean, I think a good entry might be something that's philosophy adjacent. So for some issues about what it takes to flourish as a human being, like one place great to start would be a book that was semi-popular, published by someone who was a philosopher but then left philosophy and started a motorcycle shop in Richmond. Matthew Crawford's Shop Class as Soulcraft. A great book, which I think has a lot of Aristotelian undertones, which is all about the intellectual rigor of manual labor. And also the physical, dealing with the physical world actually demands something of you that leads to flourishing. Shop Class of Soulcraft. Highly recommend.
There's I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and they were talking about essentially these folks have started a school of maybe traditional education where they're more into the Socratic method, I think is how it's phrased.
Yeah.
But it's a trade school. So you get like the first 7 weeks.
St. Joseph the Worker?
No, not the one that Pints of Aquinas is mentioned. This is one. It's a different one. I'll put it in the description because I think it was awesome. And I'm like, man, I want to go there. But
alas.
Yeah, I know. If only.
Past our time.
Yeah, past our time. But I think this would be something worthwhile if you're a young feller. Like they do 7 weeks of like 7 trades. It's 4 weeks each of 7 different trades, and then you kind of pick which trade you want to go into. And they do a lot of prayer, a lot of like living communally, essentially. I wouldn't say like as monastic life, but it's a college essentially where you're learning the trades and you're living in a very work and pray life. But that'll be in the description. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head because I probably have undiagnosed something or other. But I do have some more questions for you. There was something you'd mentioned is worthwhile activities done well.
Component parts to good human life.
That was something that stuck out, like worthwhile activities. How many activities do you have? Like this is why you, or maybe a benefit of having a flip phone is you're not wasting your time on stupid social media, which admittedly, this podcast is a form of social media and marketing of said podcast is
but not stupid social media.
Potentially.
Or highbrow.
I don't know how highbrow, but I don't know if people could take one thing out of this whole podcast, do worthwhile activities and do them well.
I tell my students in intro ethics, if you remember one thing from our class, 10 years from now, if I pass you on the street and I ask you, what are the component parts of a good human life? If you can tell me worthwhile activities done well, that will warm my heart. Yeah, that's one thing to take away from Aristotelian virtue ethics. Focus on eudaimonia, and eudaimonia's component parts are worthwhile activities done well. And so you need to figure out what activities are worthwhile and how to do them well. It doesn't sound all that like rocket scientist when rocket science when you say it, but those are the component parts of a good human life.
Worthwhile activities.
Defining
done
what
well.
counts as worthwhile, that's the tough part.
Yeah. Well, I think that when I talk to folks that I work with, most of us have kind of come to the conclusion that what is worthwhile is, I mean, this is a weird situation in the vocation that you have. It's almost like separated, and I don't think this is correct, where your vocation outside the home is different from your vocation within the home. And maybe there's a hierarchy between your different things, and maybe they shouldn't be different. But my job as a nurse outside the home is to, take care of patients to the best of my ability. Specifically, in my role now, is make sure that the nurses and the doctors that I work with and whatever other ancillary staff that I work with, make sure they have the resources to do their job well. It's difficult to, what I tell most people is, like, if you've got a family, even if you don't have everybody's got some family to some degree. If the job that you're doing does not allow you to serve your family in the way that is needed for them in that time, in that season in life, then you need to reconsider what your vocation outside the home or your job outside the home needs to be, because the higher good is the good at home.
Yeah.
Even like when I've done, the burnout coaching, performance coaching and stuff like that, that falls into that line is, well, what is your primary vocation? Because there's a primary and there's a secondary, maybe some other vocations. What's the primary? Identify that and establish that well. And anything you do outside of that is essentially geared towards serving that. And I mean, I suppose that falls into the virtue ethics, like doing these good things and doing them well.
Well, virtue ethics is all about ordering things.
Yeah, I mean, that nails it. I feel like I'm telling people the right thing.
You order. You want to have your loves in order and your goods in order, lesser goods and greater goods ordered in importance.
So you're saying we should set down a pro-con list?
I'm saying you should have certain priorities such that you know which goods ostensibly you're pursuing. Everything you're pursuing is good, but some are lesser and some are greater. Some should be governing more of your life. Some should be very, not governing much of your life at all. Yeah. If you find you get to a point in your life when a lesser good is governing a large swath of your life, that's probably a bad sign. Like Super Smash Brothers is a good, but if it's governing like 30-40% of my life, I'm probably there's something wrong.
Yeah,
it's a lesser good. It's not God. It's not my wife. It's not my kids. It's not even my job. It's making Pikachu make Link look foolish. Which he does.
I'm gonna smoke you. I'm telling you.
Try it, man. Try it.
I can't wait. Cannot wait.
I'll set it up tomorrow morning, man.
Dude, we are gonna have breakfast tomorrow, brunch. It seems like that.
Very soon from now, by the way.
I know it's coming. We're having breakfast or brunch after Holy Mass in the morning, so it's gonna be rough.
I don't know how I'll be able to fit anything else in after having my fill of Jesus.
Man, I feel like I shouldn't be laughing at that, but it is true. There is something about fasting. I'm a big fan. Like we could go all night. Like this is a problem with this, but we're gonna not do that because we're already at 2.5 hours in.
Can always have a second.
No, I absolutely. I had thought about this.
Where we can talk about AI.
Well, I
We
definitely
haven't got on that at all.
not at all. There's
And
so
I'm a
many.
cantankerous old man when it comes to AI.
Well, I think I am too.
No.
Are
you? You're a young kid, 33,
Yeah,
living
young
your
kid.
life.
Yeah.
Alexa, tell me what to do.
At least, I mean, we do have an Alexa.
Oh,
It was given to us, mostly used for what's the weather outside, what's the weather going to be this week, and Alexa, play whatever song that I want to hear at that time.
David Allen Coe, you never call me my name anymore.
No, I
Second
haven't played that
most
one at all.
Sung song by me at karaoke.
I almost got duped into karaoke the other night at the press club.
Oof, Tuesday nights?
We were there Tuesday evening, my brother-in-law and I. Shout out to my
Wait,
Mitchell.
this past Tuesday?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
I was over at Thirsty Theology. How come you weren't there?
So we went to mass and then came home, had dinner with my brother-in-law. Shout out to Mitchell Simpson. And
I mean, the karaoke doesn't start till after Thirsty Theology is over, basically. Like
yeah,
9.
we went to mass and then came home, had dinner, and then I was like, I teased him. I was like, "You want to go out for a drink?" And usually he says no, but this time he said yes. I was like, "Crap!" He called my bluff, but we had a really good time. I did feel kind of bad for him because it was like this pajama party karaoke night. It was. If you were a young man who was single and hoping to mingle, it was not your scene. For me, it was fine. I was
North
great
Street Press
people
Club
watching.
is not always the best decisions being made there.
I would agree with that. But yeah, so I do want to do this again. Hopefully we can do this. I thought about this, and I mentioned this earlier. I didn't finish the thought. But there's something I think a lot of people struggle with this nowadays, and I know that I myself have struggled with this. Years ago, I prayed for something, and I asked for prayers from the fellows on the Catholic Man Show for their they had asked for prayer requests. I prayed and I asked them to pray for other men in my life to be like the iron that sharpens iron. And sure enough, shortly after that, we ended up doing the Exodus 90 at St. Teresa's.
Because of Tim Olmsted saying, "Hey, I want to do Exodus 90, but I don't belong to this parish, so you should lead it."
And it worked out.
And I was like, "What's that?" "Oh, sure, let's do that."
Yeah.
All the while not knowing what cold showers really meant.
Cold showers is the best part of it.
No, it is
easiest
not.
part of it.
Said the guy with a cattle bucket
Trough,
in his,
right
basement.
behind you. Well, yeah, we can get into some other stuff. What I want to do, and I'm going to put you on the spot, is so we've talked about virtue ethics, maybe touched on some virtues and sub-virtues in this 2.5 hours. I want to get into the nitty-gritty. I don't know if you've seen Nacho Libre, but that's what that's about.
I just stay at generalities, man.
Well, so
nitty-gritty means I have to actually make decisions about how to live.
St. Francis de Sales talks about studying virtues or reading about virtues being problematic if you don't actually dig into the nitty-gritty and try to work out those virtues.
Aristotle says we're not wanting to learn about virtue just for its own sake. We want to be virtuous.
Exactly. So, for all of the listeners right now that want me to ask you this, which is probably 0. Just kidding. Somebody wants to know. As you and I have done Exodus and we are committed to living a virtuous life, I think it would be a good opportunity to maybe do something of a series. And I'm basically doing this so that you and I can get together and have a beer together more often. But basically, where we can hash out some of the... We'll maybe start with the 7 capital virtues that are up on my wall here.
Man,
Talk about those and how to live those out in the existences that we currently find ourselves in. Would you be willing to do that?
Just as long as you know that I teach ethics, I don't actually, live it. No, I'm kidding. Although that's a joke. That's a joke that a lot of ethicists say, and it's super true.
I teach it. I don't know. Well, if you want to,
I can tell you some stories about Peter Singer. I shouldn't know. It'd be backbiting.
Exactly. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, I'm in theory okay with that. Just so you know, I don't have any expertise on being virtuous. I have expertise on talking about virtue from within an Aristotelian virtue ethical framework.
We're all working on it. Nobody's perfect.
I think I have some interesting insight based on my reading, especially in some of the vices holding us back from some of the virtues.
Well, that's a starting point. If we can recognize the vice that we find ourselves in. Gluttony.
Well, I have personal experience with that one. But one that I don't actually, I'm not tempted very much at all by.
Hold on, don't finish this statement. Because I have found any time that I've ever said, I do not find this particular sin or vice alluring, I have immediately
lots
fallen
of
into
vices
it.
very tempting to me, like temperance, hard virtue, gluttony, tempting vice. But eating too much, super awesome. I love eating too much. It's great. It's so enjoyable, so pleasurable, and bad for my soul and body, but mostly my soul. But like other vices, it's like I'm just not tempted by it. But I can tell that our culture is, and so one would be like acquisitiveness, it's
like curiosity.
No, acquisitiveness, like acquiring material wealth.
Oh, okay,
to
I thought you said
excess.
inquisitiveness. Sorry.
And oftentimes, when it really becomes a problem, is not just the acquiring of the wealth, but what it keeps you from doing.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
And so, I teach a lot of that in my classes.
This is just free lectures for everybody out there.
So, capitalism versus socialism versus third alternatives. Distributism, otherwise known as the truth about political economy, otherwise known as Catholic social teaching when it comes to economics.
Dude, we're gonna I cannot wait. So, what I would love to do is get you out here often enough to where we could do this like maybe once a month and
sure,
do
man.
something like this. Those would be the best thing.
I mean, I'm only gonna start running a nonprofit soon and have a 12-year-old and 7-month-old who
I
don't
can
speak
come
English.
up to your attic. We can hang out in your attic.
Well, you can't bring these microphones there, can you?
Yeah, I can. They just
What?
unscrew. Like, I have a laptop. You have an outlet. We can make this happen.
Many outlets.
Yeah, we can do it.
All right,
Well,
man. I'm in principle saying sure, but just with the caveat that I'm no expert in virtue.
I'm no expert in anything except ultrasound IVs. That's the only thing that I can actually claim expertise
Spanking
in.
your monkey butt in Super Smash Bros. That's my only expertise.
I feel like we're gonna have to do this tomorrow.
I'm not that good. I'm just better than average.
All
I'm not
right,
like an
all right.
insane.
If we can be like, yeah, we'll be right back tomorrow. This is how it's gonna go.
Super Smash Brothers.
We'll see. All right, so tune in the next episode. Maybe I'll point out. We'll see how this goes. Thank you for coming out, man. This has been a lovely time.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Alistair McIntyre.
And Kathy Shryock. Or Fanning, my aunt. Kathy Shryock Fanning. I actually don't know if that's her middle name at this point, but my aunt who passed.
Let's pray for them both.
Indeed. May the souls of the faithful departed through the mercy of God rest in peace.
Amen.
St. Francis de Sales, pray for us. Also, St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us.
Also, St. Athanasius.
And St. Sebastian.
My
All
favorite.
the saints. Anything else you want to throw in there?
Come shop at my shop whenever it gets open.
We'll throw a link in there.
Also,
once there's-
Thirsty Theology, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. at Three Roads Brewery, the brewery that I own, 0.25% of. Come out, discuss theology, drink some beer, and smoke a pipe. I'll even loan you one.
It's true.
Tobacco. Just to be clear.
Tobacco. Just tobacco. Although you always got to be careful. You never want to smoke another man's pipe.
I always carry an extra just in case, Leo. Don't have to be vulgar.
Vulgar. I'm just talking about, like, you know, you could potentially. What if you had a cold and you didn't know it yet?
There you go. That's exactly what.
That's why you don't smoke another man's pipe. St. Francis de Sales, pray for us.
Please.
Please, I beg of you. Lord Jesus, save us.